fathom or envision my rage.
The weather is cold, it's a desert of snow.
I'm turning to the Wendigo. The beast lives deep in the cage. You can't even fathom or envision my rage.
The weather is cold, it's a desert of snow.
I'm turning to the Wendigo.
Y'all thought the Wendigo was a fairy tale, till you stepped into the woods and got a tickle off the deadly smell. Coming in my studio's a stupid mistake. I'm sure the switchblade can help you losing some weight. Your rap is getting cocky, got so fucking big and dropped, they'll leave you dead with more hits than the fucking king of pop. You'll be swallowing your pride, cause if you think that you can battle me, intestines hanging out like they're at a social gathering. I'm quiet in public, I don't need to plot a homicide. You'll see my silhouette and you'll probably just wanna die. Say my name, it's Columbine, I'll be letting y'all decide. A rotten mind is traumatized, where my twisted thoughts reside. Stomping through the woods, can't see over the mist. You can smell the smoke from the soulless abyss. Silent execution headed over a cliff, killing anyone who thought the Wendigo was a myth.
The beast lives deep in the cage. You can't even fathom or envision my rage.
The weather is cold, it's a desert of snow.
I'm turning to the Wendigo. The beast lives deep in the cage. You can't even fathom or envision my rage.
The weather is cold, it's a desert of snow.
I'm turning to the Wendigo.
I'm a mutant monster, welcome to the saga. Got the blood of goats in me like the chupacabra. Pentagrams and candles lit, I'm dicing fags inside of bags. My title sparks reactions, terror twice as bad as ISIS flags. I wanna do shows, but I don't think the earth's prepared. I'd end up walking out with the fucking virgin's head, turning heads literally, make the fucking surface red, and make a motherfucker wish they went to church instead. Wanna fuck with the beast? Go ahead and send your soldiers, cause I'm taking kidneys out, turn them to intestine donors. Rocking a hard place, you stuck between a pair of boulders. Acid in your shower gel, body missing from his head and shoulders. I'll attack you just for breathing, you'll get tackled till you bleed. And better watch your fucking mouth before you rattle up the demon. How could I be so lethal? Hunger seems so needful, and I don't hear, no see, nor speak no evil.
The beast lives deep in the cage. You can't even fathom or envision my rage.
The weather is cold, it's a desert of snow.
I'm turning to the Wendigo. The beast lives deep in the cage. You can't even fathom or envision my rage.
The weather is cold, it's a desert of snow.
I'm turning to the Wendigo.
I'm the Wendigo, and who is Alex? I don't fuck with foolish antics. I came through with gruesome tactics. You could say the dude's a savage. Something's got my screws unbalanced. Thoughts are bent, I use italics. Vaccines might not cause autism. My bat's gonna do some damage. Down the country road, off the meds with the cigs. Follow to your house, hop the fence, split your wigs. Body mutilated and fed to the pigs. Leave a trail of blood from the feds to the pigs.
The beast lives deep in the cage. You can't even fathom or envision my rage.
The weather is cold, it's a desert of snow.
I'm turning to the Wendigo. The beast lives deep in the cage. You can't even fathom or envision my rage.
The weather is cold, it's a desert of snow.
I'm turning to the Wendigo.
Alrighty everybody, welcome to the Eerie Hours. I'm your host Gene Skinner, and we are going to be talking about winter beasts today. I thought starting off with a rap about the Wendigo would be a great start, because people would probably think, hey, isn't Gene doing a music show? No, I'm not. I'm doing an Eerie Hours. So let's talk about the Wendigo, an Algonquin myth, based on the idea of don't fucking eat people. I know, real shocking. Don't eat people when it's cold and you might be starving, because you'll turn into a monster that is both gluttony personified and starvation at the same time, because they are never full and they will never ever be sated with their primal hunger. So let's watch a video about them. I think we've seen this one before, Mythology and Fiction Explained. I actually may have covered the Wendigo before in the past too, but I believe that video got taken down, or that was on Stream Me. Anyway, let's get to it.
Today we have a very special treat for everybody watching, because not only do we have an exciting announcement, but we also finally cover a topic that I'm sure many people have been waiting to see. We travel to the parts of North America that the Algonquin people call their home, in order to discuss a truly terrifying legend. An evil spirit that prowls the northern forests of the Atlantic coast. A monster that can be found up and down the Great Lakes region of the United States and Canada. The creature that I'm referring to is part of the most famous set of stories to originate from Algonquin folklore. These stories indeed refer to the Wendigo. Some believe that it was a large monster, and others saw it as a spirit capable of possession. The manner in which the Wendigo manifests itself depends entirely on the beliefs of the individual, and the Algonquin can be broken down into several groups of indigenous people. If we put aside the Wendigo's appearance briefly, there was a general agreement as to what the Wendigo was and what it represented. It is almost always associated with cannibalism, famine, and greed that came with the long
Wendigo
cold
as we
winters,
ponder the orb.
which is why so many
Cannibal.
saw it as a malevolent, supernatural
Good to
entity.
see everybody. Look at that.
So what does the
thing.
Wendigo actually look like? There are two very distinct archetypes that I'm sure many of you would recognize. A large-looking demonic beast, normally with the head or skull of a stag, complete with some kind of antlers or
The
horns.
Wendigo song is
This type
in
of
the
Wendigo
music
is one
section
that
of
has
the
become
Discord.
quite popular today, and it's an image that I'm sure many of you recognize from a lot of popular media. But this particular image seems to be a more modern interpretation. I remember
Yeah.
seeing this imagery when first watching the TV show Hannibal, which of course has its own underlying themes of murder and cannibalism.
Because it's
At the
about
time,
Hannibal
I didn't really
Lecter,
understand the
yeah.
Wendigo symbolism, because I didn't really know much about the Wendigo and its own association with cannibalism and acts of evil. So why does this version of the Wendigo have antlers and fur reminiscent of a stag? Sadly, I couldn't really find a conclusive answer. There isn't much mention of the Wendigo's appearance in traditional Algonquin folklore, and what we do see
It's
certainly
like a
doesn't
withered
describe
corpse.
a stag. So there could be some confusion
But
between the
really
concept of
supposed
the
to be
Navajo
like not a
skinwalker,
fucking
or this very well could be
skinwalker
a
shit.
modern stylistic interpretation. Either way, the stag is an animal that appears in folklore all around the world, though it's normally associated with woodland deities and fertility. It's also an animal that the Native Americans highly respected. So if we do go with the concept
You're
that the
dumb,
Wendigo
man.
was seen as a symbol of corruption, the fact that it then manifests as an animal that the natives held in such high regard makes it seem as if nothing is safe from the Wendigo's curse, which does highlight the seriousness of the warnings and meanings
I saw
interwoven
two deer
into
last
these
night when I was
stories.
smoking. They were just out there
The
foraging.
more traditional appearance of the Wendigo is
closer
closer
to
to,
that,
a
yeah,
haggard
ghoul.
and decomposing corpse. Its skin is stretched extremely tightly over its bones, creating a thin translucent layer of desiccated flesh,
Yeah.
from which its bones look ready to burst. Its complexion varies from a sickly white to an ashy grey. It has long spindly fingers with sharp nails that it uses to tear its
Sharp
victims
nails.
into pieces. The easiest way to describe this type of Wendigo is as a gaunt
Screen's
skeleton
slightly-
that looks
give me
like
a
it has risen
minute
from
to
the
fix
grave.
that.
Wherever the Wendigo goes, it is followed by the
The
odour of death and
classic
decay. It is a
interpretation.
vile creature with jagged, misshapen teeth that at times resemble yellow fangs. In this form, the Wendigo may be a creature that resembles a humanoid, but I assure you they are nothing short of anyone's worst nightmare.
Oh shit.
There's an interesting description that comes from Innu
there we
lore
go.
that believe Wendigos were giant creatures made of ice that
Oh,
would
that's the
dwarf
wrong
over
thing,
human
that's the TV
beings.
itself.
And this was because every time a Wendigo ate a person, they would grow in proportion to the meal. So the bigger the meal, the bigger they grew. And this was one of the ways they used to describe the Wendigo's insatiable hunger,
Oh, the TV's
because it created
unlocked.
this vicious cycle, where the more the Wendigo
what I want.
consumed, the bigger and stronger they grew, but it would have to consume more and more to satisfy its ever-growing hunger.
I think that's
This definitely gives us an interesting contrast.
Realize
You
it
have
was
these
off.
enormous gluttonous creatures, and then you have these thin, gaunt husks that are wasting away, but
looks
both
good.
still suffer from starvation, and that is what we consider the curse of the Wendigo.
Yes.
Its hunger can never be sated.
Can't be
Its
sated.
quest for new victims is eternal.
Yes.
Wendigos are always regarded as evil,
Spoopy.
and this is in no doubt because of their cannibalistic nature.
You don't
but how
say.
does one become such an evil entity? There is the belief that humans could turn into Wendigos if they were overcome by greed. These stories were told as a way to encourage moderation and essentially scare individuals into behaving a certain way. Those who committed unspeakable acts of cannibalism
Yes,
were
Grown
also
Up says
thought to
better
become
things to do,
Wendigos,
like review
and this
Tool
belief is where many
albums.
attribute the start of the Wendigo legend. There were, however, extremely
Yes,
dark
clearly.
times where famine was so bad that people had no choice but to resort to cannibalism just in order to survive and make it through the long cold winter. It's not really
hi,
common today,
Huck.
but in times of extreme famine, some of the Native American people would perform a ceremonial dance that involved wearing a mask and dancing backwards behind a drum. This ceremony was mostly considered to be a satirical way to reinforce the seriousness of the Wendigo taboo. Many saw the Wendigo as a metaphor that represented imbalance and disharmony, not only in an individual, but in society as a whole. This idea of selfishness does also tie in with the fact that Wendigos were seen as solitary creatures, often being referred to as spirits of the lonely places. So what makes the Wendigo so special, and why are we so scared of them? The possession of a Wendigo isn't like your generic spirit
one of
or
those
demon.
movies, I forget
It
which
chooses
one.
its victim very carefully and slowly eats away at their sanity.
But
It
that's
enters their
closer to
thoughts
a
and plagues their
traditional
mind
Wendigo,
with
yeah.
countless nightmares. Unable to sleep, they start experiencing a burning sensation throughout their entire body. This has been described as Wendigo fever, and there have been countless tales of people running stark naked through forests at the dead of night, claiming that they have Wendigo fever. Now, as a supernatural entity, you'd expect some kind of supernatural abilities, and most of these are exactly what you would imagine. The Wendigo is extremely fast and has unnatural strength despite how frail some of them may look. As expert hunters, they have heightened
That's the
endurance
game.
and senses,
What
making it so
game?
they can hunt in all manner of
Is it
terrain
game?
and temperature.
Are you a
The
game?
older the Wendigo
Are we all
gets, the
games?
stronger it becomes, As its corruption spreads through the forests, so does its influence on nature. Some are capable of controlling woodland creatures, and others are so powerful they can control the weather, with the eldest able to summon a darkness capable of concealing the sun, making it so no one is safe regardless of time or location.
Is that like...
Despite what we perceive to be just stories, there have been numerous cases over the years of people committing horrid crimes, claiming that they were possessed by a Wendigo.
This guy who murdered his family.
In 1878, a Native American man named Swift Runner butchered and ate his entire family. That winter was said to have been particularly harsh, and Swift Runner's son had sadly died because of the extreme conditions. Now, we don't know if Swift Runner and his family ate the boy to survive, but the mutilated remains of his wife and 5 other children were later found. He eventually confessed to killing and eating his entire family, but he was adamant that his actions were due to a Wendigo possession. So did devouring his son turn him into a Wendigo? Did he butcher his family because he felt they wouldn't survive the winter? Or did he value the self-preservation of his own life over his family's? The answer to those questions we'll most likely never know. Another rather famous case is that of Jack Fiddler and his brother Joseph, who were arrested for the murder of over a dozen people. As the chief of his people, Jack was thought to be capable of removing evil, which is why he got away with killing so many, claiming that they were all possessed by a Wendigo.
He looks barely Native
Jack managed to
American.
escape captivity during a routine walk outside, and he eventually hung himself before the trial came to a conclusion. His brother Joseph, however, wasn't so lucky. He was sentenced to death by Magistrate Ellsworth Perry. Despite the numerous appeals of his innocence, Joseph, ironically enough, was eventually given a pardon, but it came 3 days after his death in 1909. These type of cases led people to believe that it might be a more serious mental issue, one that would later be dubbed Wendigo psychosis, the deep craving for flesh. But whether it was a real mental disorder is something that was heavily debated, as the number of reported cases decreased dramatically in the 20th century,
it still
when
happens,
the Algonquin people adapted European ideologies and began to live less rural lifestyles.
It does happen still, though.
There's no doubt that the Wendigo myth has changed and evolved over the years. It's now become another monster that reflects our own issues as humans: greed, selfishness, and in some extreme or metaphoric cases, cannibalism. It's unlikely that many of the Native American tribes still believe in the legends of the Wendigo as adamantly as they once did. To them, the Wendigo was an evil spirit that embodied everything they hated. It can be interpreted as a symbol of corruption, from what they perceive to be outsiders, changing their landscape and the beliefs of their people. Stories of the Wendigo were used as a way to encourage a balanced lifestyle and respect for one's peers and the world surrounding them. A creature with insatiable hunger, a spirit capable of possession, or a story meant to encourage cooperation and warn against the dangers of greed. You decide. Before we do end today's video, I'd like to tell you about our new series of short stories that I'll be publishing over the Christmas and New Year period in the build up to our book release. The stories themselves are in a completely different universe and part of an entirely separate project, but I feel like it's a great opportunity to show you the style of writing, as the author of the stories is also the co-author of the book. It's also really nice to give you...
Okay, we don't need to hear a shilling. We just take a listen to this. It's gonna play.
Be me. Wake some of the accursed, immortal Wendigo spirit, a being of pure hunger and hate, going hunting to stop the endless pain. Some fucking dude shows up, wanting when does he or some shit. Fucking what? I'm 58% sure I was a guy before I turn. I tell him this in the voice of a long dead soul screaming in bloody agony. He pulls out goddamn cheerleader outfit and calls me a femboidigo. What the actual fuck?
There we go. Beautiful. Alright, let's move on. Next. This. Beautiful still shot, by the way. This totally doesn't look like it's out of a porn. I'm just gonna take that face real quick. Just gonna fucking do that. Alright. Put this right here, just for you, Chad. Here you go. Have this face. You decide what you want to do with that. There you go. That totally doesn't look like it's out of a porn.
I hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host Ayman Hassan and welcome back to another video. Now I've honestly wanted to do this one for quite a while. For the uninitiated, the Wendigo is a mythological evil spirit or creature that hails from folklore of the First Nations Algonquin tribes in Canada and the US. It can apparently possess and be a human, making them do horrible things like murder, switch to cannibalism, become incredibly greedy, and so forth. Their reputation is so bad within indigenous communities that Wendigo psychosis is a thing where people are so terrified of becoming a cannibal or a Wendigo, yet they start craving human meat. So yes, this creature is bad and the story is like even worse, so let's just get straight into it. These are the top 10 scary Wendigo stories.
Scared yet, Chet?
Number 10 is Swift Runner. Now this story must be one of, if not the most famous cases of Wendigo psychosis ever reported. Plains Cree trapper Swift Runner was a First Nations man from Alberta, and in the winter of 1878, Swift's family was starving. His oldest son ended up dying shortly after from starvation, and shortly after that, out of nowhere, Swift killed and ate his wife
Just
and
eat your
5
family.
children.
Just do
now,
it.
Swift was not a cannibal. He only lived 25 miles away from Hudson's Bay emergency food supplies.
Wow.
So if he was truly that hungry, he would have just done the trek and gotten food. It was later revealed that he was suffering from Wendigo psychosis, and he was executed after his confession, in which he said he was possessed by a Wendigo spirit during his killing spree. Imagine being so scared of becoming this cannibalistic monster that your paranoia and fear are the very things that turn you into it. Coming in at number 9.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you do that?
This one was shared by Reddit user Uthana, who said growing up he spent his summers with his grandma out in the country. Her house was situated near a pond that housed more than a couple of frogs.
Jenny, meat is meat. No wonder you're a fucking...
The user used to complain about all the noise when
No,
he was
you can't be a
asleep,
Wendigo,
so
Jenny. You're fat.
decided to tell him
What am I
the
saying?
story. Long before the grandma owned the house, it belonged to a very old couple. The man hated the frogs for a long time and wanted to get rid of them, but his wife told him they kept the Wendigo.
Pondering the orb.
Brushing her off completely, he decided to go around the pond and catch all the frogs. And obviously it took some time, but he eventually did catch them all. That night, without the singing frogs, the man and his wife were brutally slaughtered and eaten by the Wendigo. Despite the user thinking it was just an old ghost story, he had never been more scared in his life than when he heard the frogs stop croaking himself.
Oh shit, the frogs got eaten.
Fiddler. Back in 1907, OG Cree chief and medicine man Jack Fiddler was infamous for defeating Wendigos.
French-Canadian.
He was apparently really bloody
Even
good at
worse.
it. Jack and his brother went after
Jack
people
Fiddler.
who either had Wendigo psychosis or had transformed completely into Wendigos. The duo killed up to 14 people, and because Jack was known to have these great powers capable of stopping the spirit of Wendigos, that's how he got away with killing as many people as he did. However, in 1907, they were arrested for murder and homicide for the people they were trying to save. Jack ended up committing suicide prior to his sentence, and his brother Joseph died in prison days before finding out he was actually pardoned and was set free. You could have had it all, Joseph. You could have had it all. Could have had it all.
Stop.
Like number 7 slot is Pet Cemetery. Our Lord and Savior Stephen King has blessed us with some of the scariest stuff I've ever seen or read. His book
Wow, imagine thinking Stephen King is good.
Pet Cemetery actually has a Wendigo as the thing responsible for resurrecting all the animals and humans that were interred in the Micmac Cemetery. The family just stopped using the land because they think it's gone bad or sour, but really it's the Wendigo who's behind everything. It starts infecting the
That's in the
minds
story,
of the
that's
parents, and they
actually
start
not
having
the fucking...
visions of each other and wanting to kill each other, and some of them actually end up going through with it. The reanimated creatures are horribly changed. They're essentially just vessels for the Wendigos to put their spirits into and just to kill.
Great.
I know this one is very fictional, but King did a lot of research into the mythical creature before writing the book. So
sure
a lot of
he
the scary
did.
elements
I'm sure
are
Stephen King did
factual,
all
and
of
that is
it.
scary as hell, even more so if you've seen the
I
movie.
mean, opinion immediately discarded plus Brown. Yes,
In a
she's
good
a
way,
street
bad in a
shitter.
good way. Now at number 6 is the Texan Wendigo Part 1. Shared by Sehan Ricky from Yorktown, Texas, he said this took place on the 12th of January last year. The boy was bored as hell and had walked around his entire town that night and decided to
Oh yes,
go
imagine
home.
being so bored
The
you
route
walk
to get
around
home
your
had a
entire
large open
town.
area near it, and despite no one in town really exploring it, the boy thought it'd be a great idea to go through it that night. As he's coming up to the edge of the woods, he sees this massive 8 to 10 foot very pale figure walking away from the woods and going towards one of the houses. He decides at this point to avoid that situation altogether and goes straight into the woods.
Just go straight in the woods.
Overwhelmed with this feeling of dread and this feeling of being watched. Can you imagine how scared this guy probably was? It's like 1 a.m. He's in the woods. He just saw this enormous figure. I don't even know why he went into the woods to begin with.
Just do it.
That's like when someone in a horror movie makes a decision that you know is going to kill them, and you're just like, come on, why? You know better. You were raised better than that. Coming in at number 5 is the Texan Wendigo Part 2.
The Texan Wendigo Part 2.
Not end there. Either way, the feeling of being watched gets worse and worse, and now he's at the point where he's looking behind him.
The Texan Wendigo doesn't wear like a cowboy hat and go yeehaw.
Now the 5th time he does this, he
and talk about succeeding
this
from
time
the Union again.
Is on all fours, still standing at about 5 feet.
Is that what we get with the Texas Wendigo?
Skin almost like it had been bleached. The face was human-looking. The eyes were deep pits of black, and its arms were slender.
Their own independent Wendigo country.
And this is precisely the sight you never want to see in daylight, let alone when you're walking alone in the woods at night. The Wendigo started swaying back and forth like it was debating how it was going to pounce on the boy. He wasted no time running the hell out of those woods and eventually getting home, making sure he did not look back even once. God knows what he would have seen. I would have shot myself just thinking about the situation.
Yeah,
I would have shot myself before I
it.
even entered the woods. I would not enter the woods. At number 4 are the Wendigo Woods Part 1. This was from traveling storyteller who shared that one summer her parents bought a new vacation home and they went to live in it for a few months. The log house was near the coast of the Atlantic Ocean and right on the US-Canadian border. Either way, when they arrived, the girl called out to her dad who was inside and asked if he could help her bring her suitcase in, and he obviously said yes. I love when dads are there just to do stuff like that. Go you dads. Either way, the dad came out the front door and all of a sudden he froze. He was looking at something behind the user and his eyes looked paralyzed with fear as his skin got paler and paler. And mind you, her dad was
became
not a
the
small
Wendigo.
guy by any means. He was huge himself, but somehow scared of whatever he was looking at. Within seconds, he snapped out of it and brought the suitcase inside like nothing had even happened. At dinner, the girl asked her dad what he was looking at earlier, and both parents looked like she just asked the most ridiculous question ever. Then all of a sudden, some form hit the window, shattering it, and when she looked towards the window, she saw this horrific, tall, human-like figure running away. Dun dun dun. We saw the Wendigo Woods Part 2.
Great,
I mean, after all that went
that.
down, there was 100% definitely going to be an elephant in the rooms, and so now the user was like, what the hell was that? Because her parents didn't even look phased, they didn't even bat an eye, their blood pressure did not even raise. Mine is raised just telling the story. Now eventually the parents broke and asked her if she'd ever heard of the legend of the Wendigo. They explained it to her, telling her that the location of their log house was the epicenter of all Wendigo sightings that had ever happened. The couple believed that the area was a center of the lore and they wanted to capture one if possible and examine and study it. The girl did not sleep a wink for the next 2 months and surprisingly encountered numerous Wendigo sightings.
Yeah, I'm sure.
What I don't get is why the Wendigos didn't just possess or kill or eat this family. Why are they just letting them be? Now, at number 2 is the Thump. This one was shared by the user Codas Gaming, who lives in Killeen, Texas.
Codas
Now,
Gaming,
the user was about 11 or 12
Another
at the time of the
Texan.
story, and he was walking home from his friend's house.
that's where
around
Wendigos take
sunset.
place in
For some
Texas.
reason, that night the streets were a lot
where it
emptier than
totally
usual. It
snows
was
all the
quiet,
time.
and there was no one
Oh, wait.
around. After passing 5 houses, the boy suddenly felt the shiver go down his spine.
Oh,
Something
wait.
was
There's
watching
only
him,
certain
and he
parts
could
of Texas
feel it,
where
and
it
as soon
even
as he
snows.
turned
If
around,
that.
his worst fears were
They're
confirmed.
usually, you know,
The thing was as great
North-
as
North
molding clay and
Texas,
about 7
so
to
I
8
don't-
feet tall. Its arms
I
were
don't know.
extremely skinny and long like twigs, and his eyes and mouth were deep black sockets. It also had some kind of black rag around its neck, which had
Blood
no purpose
rag.
whatsoever, it just made it even creepier.
Just has a
Now, as
bloody
soon as the
rag.
guy saw the Wendigo, he ran home and he could fully hear the thumps of the creature following him. Now, as soon as the boy finally got inside, slammed the door and locked it,
Slammed
he said
that
he felt
door,
a
Chad.
thump along
Slammed
the
it.
door, and it felt like a dead corpse just
A
falling
dead
against
corpse?
the door. He then rushed to the window to see if it was still there, and all he saw was the Wendigo vanish into thin air. Remind me never to go to Texas, because that's not happening. And finally, at number 1 is Through the Binoculars. This one was shared by Artestesia from Wyoming. Back in
Wyoming,
September
okay, that one I
2016, she
believe
drove
more
up to the
than
Big Horn Mountains in
Texas.
Buffalo,
Jesus.
and obviously she packed accordingly. She went up there about 4 times a week, so this wasn't a big deal by any means, and she wasn't scared, because why would she be? It's just a routine trip. That day, however, she went to a different location in the mountains called Hettinger, as opposed to the place she usually camped at. As she was taking in the view and looking over the hill, she saw an extremely tall figure emerging from the snow. I love how it's just like her handy-dandy binoculars, and looked out of it to see the humanoid pale-looking
handy-dandy binoculars, Chad, okay?
Lens.
Don't
She
be a
looked away
bigot.
from the binoculars to see the monster coming right for her with its dagger-like nails, long limbs, and extremely deep-set mouth and eyes. She decided to hide in whatever hole she could find, even covering her mouth so the Wendigo couldn't hear her breathe. I mean, he couldn't hear you, he could probably sense your heartbeat. They probably have those kind of powers.
Yes,
Either way, she
like totally they
eyes
can
'cause she
sense
couldn't
your
even bear
heartbeat.
to look, and when she finally
Just got
opened
these
them
powers.
again, she saw the Wendigo looking right through the hole, knowing something was there, but not knowing what. Eventually left the area, and the girl literally herself, as I would as well.
Wow.
I would literally just give myself up as an offering. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to survive against you, just kill me now. And that is it for today's video, guys. Honestly, just to put it straight, I don't actually know how to pronounce it. A lot of people were saying Wendigo, Wendigo,
Wendigo.
Yeah, Wendigo or Wendigo. So let me
know-
know which one
we
it
know
is in
you
the
can't
comments
speak
below. I
English,
just
it's
stuck to
okay.
Wendigo. Let me know
Anyway,
what you guys
that was
thought in
most
the comments
amazing
below.
top
As always,
10s,
I'm your host,
fucking
Ethan Hassan, and I'll
Wendigo
catch you in the
one.
next one.
Let's
Bye.
move on to stories. Other stories. Well, that's disturbing. Internet Urban Legends, Black-Eyed Children, I believe. Alright. Anyway, here we've got Snarled Wendigo animated shit. Here we go.
Come here. Hey, I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary?
Tell us all about Sapphire. Use your mother's voice inspired by Zen.
Before we head into our next chapter, make sure you subscribe to Snarled and turn on the bell for notifications.
Not doing that.
This next story comes from Zen in Colorado, who had a close encounter with a dangerous
your parents
creature
naming you
you may have
Zen.
heard of. When Zen was around 6 years old, she lived deep in the mountains of Colorado.
Fucking-
Her family had no internet and no cell phone coverage. They lived in isolation from the rest of the world, and liked it that way.
I'm sure
Zen
they
spent
did.
most of her days outside, playing in
Fuck
the
the
forest
world.
that surrounded her house. Her only
Just
company
living-
up there
just
was
living
her
at
2
remote
huge
places.
St. Bernards.
Oh,
One
puppies.
day, Zen was playing in the forest with her dogs. She realized she wandered a little too far when she looked behind her and couldn't see her house anymore.
Good job.
She found herself in a clearing where there were piles of strange sticks strewn around. Little did Zen know at the time that they weren't sticks at all.
Oh, yeah, they're bones.
She looked up. Huge rain clouds had started to form and the wind picked up speed. A storm was coming and she needed to get back inside. Zen started to head in the direction that she thought was home. With every step,
But
the
it's
wind's
obviously
power
not.
increased. The leaves from the trees were swirling around her and little droplets of rain sprinkled on top of her. She walked for what seemed like forever. And then she heard it,
Her mother's
rustling
voice.
in the trees. It was coming from the trees in front of her. Zen became super uneasy. She felt like someone was watching her. Then her dogs started to growl and bark. They stood in front of her, protecting her. A twig snapped and her dogs lost it. She had never seen them act this way. Then, a voice called out from the trees. It was her mother's. Zenny? The voice said.
Totally her mother.
Zenny? Mom? Zen wanted to be comforted by this. She should have been comforted by this,
But she wasn't.
but she couldn't. That was her nickname and that was her mother's voice, but it sounded...
It's not even spelled like that, Harry. It's this.
It's like when you pull on a record
That's
and
how
the
you
words
say
are slow
Zen
and mumbled.
in fucking insect speak, I guess.
The voice shouted again. That was definitely not Zen's mother. She began to run,
hi, Porky.
her dogs barking the entire way. But she stopped when she saw those familiar sticks. She had run the wrong way.
She never said
Zenny,
that.
Zenny, come here. Come here, Zenny. Zenny, come here. The voice had followed her. She took off in the other direction, not stopping for a second until finally, her house! She ran inside and after she caught her breath, told her mother what happened. She assured her that it was probably
mother
just
was
the wind
already the
howling in the
Wendigo.
trees and nothing more. It wasn't until years later, after Zen and her family had moved from that house, that Zen decided to ask her mother about that day. Mom, do you remember our old house and that day when I heard your voice in the forest? Oh, yeah. Her brow furrowed as she contemplated her next words. I guess you're old enough now to know the truth.
The truth.
The truth about what? When you told me about the voices in the trees, I didn't want to scare you at the time because you were so young. That house was on Native American land. I called a medicine man to come and cleanse our house and property. When I told him your story, he said that you were very lucky to be alive. You had narrowly escaped a Wendigo.
A Wendigo.
A Wendigo
pointing.
is a demonic spirit that possesses humans and turns them into cannibals.
Leave my land.
They have an insatiable hunger for human flesh and will stop at nothing to get it. Wendigos are vicious, but also very cunning and tricky. With their heightened sense of hearing, they can pick up the panicked heartbeat of a lost human from miles away.
Yeah, I'm sure they have these
Then, with their
powers.
long legs and supernatural speed, they run over to their prey and begin their twisted game. Sometimes they taunt their victims with their deep growls. Other times, they'll mimic human voices of loved ones to trick you into coming closer.
Come here.
According to legend, a Wendigo is nearly impossible to escape. Once it's made you its target, you're as good as dead. To this day, Zen still can't believe that she is one of the lucky few to have escaped the clutches of a Wendigo. Thank you to Zen for sharing this encounter with us. And another special thank you to Bailey Jenkins Franklin for your support of the show. I really appreciate it. So, do you think that was really a Wendigo that was hunting Zen?
I saw the anime
Let me know in the
Wendigo,
comments. Like this video if it gave you the chills.
Subscribe, blah, blah,
and
blah,
don't
blah,
forget
blah.
to subscribe to Snarled and our sister.
There you go. So now we got some stories to listen to from Darkness Prevails, so let's take a listen to these. Give me 1 second, it's not fully back at where it should be. Here we go, let's hear some Wendigo stories. Because I know where everybody loves these.
I'm starving. Would you join me for a meal? This world is a strange one. The Wendigo is back again, and it's hungrier than ever.
It's back.
If you haven't heard the legend of the Wendigo, let me remind you. The Wendigo is a spirit that possesses those who have tasted human flesh, changing them into insatiable monsters. Just because they were people once doesn't mean they have any humanity left. The next time you're in the woods, be sure to keep an eye out for the Wendigo, or you could be its next meal. Enjoy these allegedly real Wendigo encounters. But
Why
first,
is she your
I have a
hero?
request for all those creative writers out there. Our first app is in the work, and I need some choose-your-own-adventure scary stories.
By the way. I don't know if
Go
he
to
has this app anymore.
deathbyfear.com/do-something to find out how you can submit your story, or to see a preview of the app. Also, I'll be releasing a demo for my patrons very soon, so consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/darknessprevails.
Videos being played in reverse,
Now,
I just noticed that.
this is weird, but I have a sudden craving for human flesh.
It was going the wrong way. I don't think it's going that way now. Now it looks like normal.
Number 1. Wendigo in the Rocky Mountains. Submitted by
In the Rocky Mountains?
Alex.
Don't you mean Rocky Mountains, my guy? Rocky Mountains?
This happened to me last winter, and I still am not sure exactly what happened.
The Rocky Mountains.
But I do know it's the first time I ever experienced true horror. I'm 17 years old, and I'm a 3-year varsity letterman at my local high school.
Okay.
After a long swim season, our team won first place at the district swim meet, and our coach was extremely proud of our performances.
In the Rocky Mountains.
Our coach was a really nice guy. He always promised us that if we made him proud at districts, he would give us a big reward. I was surprised to find out only a week later that this reward would be a mountain vacation for everyone on the team who was willing
let's go
to
up
come
to the
along.
fucking mountains.
Our coach explained that his best friend owns a pretty nice cabin in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado.
He's saying it wrong.
From what he told
Rocky
us,
Mountains.
the cabin sounded huge and had several rooms for each person to sleep in, as well as 3 different floors. It took me some convincing, but I had my license, and my parents let me drive their old car halfway across the country to Colorado. I was no stranger to driving on very long road trips, so I was not concerned with how long it would take. I packed up my gaming laptop, my phone, my tablet, and a few other electronics I could listen to during the long drive. Then I headed northwest from my home state.
What?
This may seem like a strange thing for a school team to do, but most of us have been with Coach for years. Every one of us and our parents. We're on a come have dinner with us basis with our coach, and there was plenty of trust between us. I'll cut through the majority of the drive, since it basically consisted of 2 days of me sleeping at truck stops and peeing in rather filthy McDonald's bathrooms.
Awful.
It was about 8:30 in the morning when I reached the particular mountain the cabin was located on, and I pulled into the driveway to see several cars already there, my friends and teammates inside their vehicles, waiting for the coach. They told me that our coach would be there with the keys to the gate in half an hour. Then we could all go in. Less than half of the team was there anyway, and there were about 20 more teammates still on their way. An hour later, my best friends pull in. Let's call them Lee, Sam, Ari, and Brendan. Lee was and is my best friend. In fact, she's like a little sister to me. Ari is my ex, and while things were weird between us sometimes, we were still friends. Brendan was pretty much that one friend that everyone gives a really hard time to for no reason.
And he had
finally,
memes.
Sam was the nerd. He's a really cool guy, but he and I spend half the time we hang out with each other talking about Fallout. I'll skip ahead to when my coach and assistant coach finally pulled into the driveway in their car. Only 3 people were absent from the group when our coaches arrived. That group of 3 already called the coach though, telling him they were stuck in a snowstorm a few miles away and would not be able to make it until morning.
Seth Rogen keeps getting blown out.
The snow was beginning to fall here, and pretty heavily at this point, and the moon was only just able to shine through the snowy clouds
I swear,
above
when
us.
I keep looking at the water, it
We
looks
hauled
like it's
our
going
belongings
backwards
through the
than going
knee-deep
the right
snow
way.
to the front door of the cabin, and I have to say, the place was amazing. It was really 3 stories tall, with a big living room with several couches, a big rug, lamps, tables, and a big flat-screen TV sitting right above the fireplace in the center.
I'm glad the cabin has electricity.
You could look straight up to the ceiling of the cabin from the couches, and if you stared for too long, it would probably give you vertigo.
Probably.
There were balconies surrounding the living room on each floor.
Okay, I'm gonna
leading
fall
to the
asleep
bedrooms
now.
and bathrooms.
Later, Porky.
The older kids in the group, the seniors, claimed their bedrooms before any of us could. I may have been a junior back then, but the seniors outnumbered all of us.
At least you're not on mic,
This
so
meant that
can't
the
hear
rest
you
of us
fucking
would have to
snore.
sleep in the living room. I had no problem with this, so I grabbed
The
my
water is
blanket
going back
and
and
made
forth.
my bed
Yeah,
on
it
the
is.
couch
It's
closest
going,
to the
like,
fireplace,
the
which
wrong
conveniently
way,
had
then
an
the
outlet
right way.
adjacent to it,
It's going,
which I plugged my
you know,
laptop
like
into.
the fucking waterfall's doing the
I
right
watched
thing,
a
then
few
doing the wrong
YouTube
thing.
videos for a while, then played some Battlefield. I drifted off well after everyone else did.
I'm glad he was playing
around
Battlefield
midnight, if I had to say,
while camping.
and I let the crackling
I don't
of
even
the
know
fire
if this is a
nearby
woman or a
lull
dude.
me
I
to
have no
sleep.
fucking idea.
I woke up feeling
Alex
extremely
is-
thirsty and very,
Yeah, Alex could
very
be a
cold.
female name too.
Besides the thirst, I saw no reason for me to have been woken up. However, despite how cold I was, I could feel myself laying in a pool of sweat. It was
pool of
disgusting.
sweat.
I had goosebumps all over my body, and I was paralyzed with fear for no apparent reason.
You could have been having
No
sleep
one else was
paralysis.
awake in the room. It was still dark out, and the snow was piling up outside. I reached for my phone quietly, but when I tried to turn it on, the battery was dead.
Oh no,
That
dead
wasn't
battery.
right. It was at full charge when I drifted off, and I'd even left it on the charger. The next thing I noticed was that the fire was dwindling down, but still lit up the room ever so faintly. And that's when I heard it. A quiet creak coming from the kitchen. My brain told me it was one of my teammates getting a drink of water, like I wanted to do, but my body told me it was dangerous. There was a tall silhouette looming across the living room from me. It was thin and white.
Oh no, it's white, the most dangerous part about it all.
It
White.
had hairs on its forearms and calves, and its face was too obscure to make out any discernible features.
Too obscure.
Other than what appeared to be massive, sharp teeth glinting from its mouth. It stood about 10 feet tall. I mean, anywhere else, this thing would have had to crawl on its hands and knees in order to fit. It walked gracefully across the living room, glancing down at each sleeping teammate as it passed them.
Is it gonna suck them?
As it got closer to me and the fire,
Suck their soul
I
out?
could make out more and more of its face. Its eyes were milky white, like that of some corpse. It had no nose, as if what had been there had frozen or decayed and fallen off a long time ago.
Fucking,
I closed my eyes, but just barely peeked through my eyelashes, so I could still see the thing.
It's cartilage, chat. Your nose is cartilage. You could lose it at any time.
Of course, I thought about screaming and waking up everyone.
It's not really a bone.
But I couldn't see any scenario where that would end up well for any of us. I watched as it got closer to me.
You won't have a nose and you're a skeleton, Chad.
It looked
alright?
annoyed.
To live with that.
It looked down at the fire and immediately walked away, out of my view. I stayed awake for the longest time after it left, and before I even know it, I fell back to sleep.
And then it sucked
when
my
I
soul
woke up,
right out.
I was not covered in sweat this time, or even leftover body odor for that matter, and my phone was fully charged. I chalked up the incident quickly to a nightmare, then went into the kitchen to greet my 3 teammates, who finally made it to the cabin earlier that morning. Me and my group of friends decided that we were going to go skiing down the homemade ski course made by our coach's friends. We were dressed head to toe in thick snowsuits. Me and Brendan ended up skiing down the same path together, while the others were separated by a fork in the path. Me and Brendan were doing fine for a while, until we saw the path end abruptly ahead of us, into nothing more than a wall of thick trees.
Yeah.
If it weren't for the snow and the thick padding on our snowsuits, we could have gotten hurt, but thankfully we were okay. I suggested that we walk west, toward where the path split off to find the others, and then we could go back to the cabin together.
You went the wrong fucking way,
But Brendan insisted that he could hear Lee calling us from the south. We did the dumbest thing ever then. We split up. I didn't hear Lee, and I just figured that Brendan's ears must have been ringing from that emergency stop we had to make. I was only walking away from him for about 3 minutes
I heard the gulping
when I heard Brendan scream. It sent chills down my spine, but I did not hesitate to turn back and run toward the sound. I found Brendan lying face down in the snow, with a bloody scratch going down his back. Whatever did this pierced his thick snowsuit like it was warm butter. Seconds later, Lee and the others came through the trees, running to see what had happened. But there was no time to explain it all. We picked up our unconscious friend, and we began to carry him up the mountain for 15 long, miserable minutes.
It's the Wendigo wearing his skin.
We found our coach reading a book on the deck, and right away he put Brendan in his car to take him to the doctor in town. We came along.
That's not the real Brendan.
An hour later, he was being bandaged up by a doctor at a local hospital. He said we were lucky it did not get infected, but Brendan would have to take antibiotics for the next 2 weeks just to be safe.
Okay.
I then asked the doctor what he thought it was, and he insisted it was a claw mark from a bear, but it was much deeper than any bear claw that he'd ever seen. The rest of the trip went without incident, but when I talked to Brendan about what attacked him, he took me away in private, then told me in very chilling detail. As I heard him explain it, I found myself unable to breathe. He said it was a tall, bony white creature, standing at about 10 feet. It had long legs and long arms that hung down to the ground. He told me that its claws were almost a foot long, that the last thing he could remember was the thing scratching his back, so he must have passed out from fear alone.
Brendan's still
After
up there,
hearing
chat.
this story, I couldn't find the courage within myself to tell him about my dream, which I now knew was more than some dream.
That's how you make it scarier.
After that trip to Colorado, I'm very glad to be far away from that place, far away from that thing, whatever it was. I'll be thankful if I never have to see it again. I truly believe there are things out there that are dangerous, things we don't know anything about yet. Number 2. Wendigo in Colorado.
Okay.
Submitted by Hunter T.
That's a dude. Like the last person who had a name that's pretty much either way.
I'm 16 years old and from Colorado. I'm very into things involving the supernatural, so as you can imagine, I'm very paranoid about them. Every year, I'd go up into the Colorado Rockies and I'd cut wood for my grandparents. I practically lived there. I know every part of the 80 acres they had. They have a wood-burning fireplace to keep warm during the winter. It's usually just me and a couple of other family members. This particular year, I ended up coming up twice. The second time I came up, it was late fall, and I was out of school. While my grandparents were enjoying warmth inside, I was in the middle of the woods doing some last-minute woodcutting in the middle of a white snow. Soon I became tired and decided to stop and rest while I ate and listened to some music. Then I began to refill the chain oil.
The chain oil?
I didn't notice it at first, but the woods went
right there
quiet.
was that demon.
What little wildlife was left had become silent. I stopped what I was doing, and I decided to listen to this nothingness.
Nothingness.
That's weird, I thought,
wow.
Sitting in the bed of my truck.
That's weird.
Nothing. And that's when I heard something. Unless you hear it yourself, it can be difficult to give you the proper description. But if I had to, I'd say it was like a cross between a black bear and a wolf.
A wolf bear.
I completely froze when I heard it, and I continued to listen to the forest, and nothing else came. I knew full well that this shouldn't have been some black bear. I quickly loaded everything up, and I left back to the cabin. Throughout the night, that weird silence never returned. All I could hear was the normal wildlife. Coyotes mainly. Their yips as they caught their prey was oddly comforting out there in the woods.
Yipes.
The next day, I went out to cut wood around 7-ish, and the sun had mostly set behind the snowy clouds. But today, I grabbed my dad's .38 revolver, and I placed it in the cab of the truck.
Okay.
Just for safety reasons.
Precautions.
I began cutting. At least an hour into my cutting, I ran out of gas and decided to stop and eat a little bit.
You.
Then I had noticed how the woods went quiet again, just like the previous day. It was so strange. It made my stomach turn. I slowly grabbed the gun and decided to look around. I thought the gun would make me feel safer, but I still felt very creeped out. Then, to the left of me, I heard the telltale sound of a twig snapping underfoot, and I quickly turned around. But of course, there was nothing there. I laughed at myself, saying that I shouldn't be so paranoid. Albeit a bit nervously, I continued eating, and I got this feeling again of being watched. For some reason, I decided to look up, and when I saw it, my mouth stayed open. There was something in the tree, a thin and pale thing clinging to the aspen tree before me. It was covered head to toe with pale skin, and before I could decide to take a breath, this thing, with inhuman speed, jumped away from the tree. Wasting no time, I dropped my food and jumped in my truck, the .38 revolver clinging to my chest. I started the vehicle, and I drove down the road. But of course, I saw it again, standing in the middle of the road, right in front of me. In a split second, I was able to take in the remainder of its appearance. Seeing this creature, it made me realize that a person can cry tears of fear. It was around 7.5 to 8 feet tall. It was very, very pale. The thing had red eyes, with small deer-like antlers on its head, and whatever this thing was, its lower jaw protruded out far, much too far to be natural. I was barely able to form thoughts in my head at this moment, but being so scared, I was seconds away from slamming my foot on the gas and aiming for this creature. But before I could, the thing ran. It ran right towards me, so I floored it. Luckily, or unluckily, the creature jumped out of the way, but I just kept going right back to the cabin. I didn't say a word. I simply got out and ran into my room. I locked myself in there, and I didn't come out for hours. As soon as I was able to move, though, curiosity took hold, and I decided to put a little research into what I saw. The thing I found that matches best would be a Native American monster called the Wendigo. I don't want to come back to my grandparents' land, but I know I'll have to, which might also mean that I might have to face the Wendigo again one day. And that, my friends, scares me more than anything. Stay safe, and even more so, stay alert in the woods. Number 3. Giant White Creature. Submitted by Morgith66. I'm a Baptist, so I don't believe in ghosts or that sort of thing, but I firmly do believe that monsters are far too real. This encounter, if you will, happened when I was 14. Me and my dad were deer hunting at a friend's house in upstate New York. We were hunting in a field behind the friend's house. Between the house and his field were 2 large garages and a small valley. Woods surrounded the field on 3 sides, with a farm off to the left. Well, one day, me and my dad were sitting in the hunting blind, more of an elevated large plastic can if anything. It was getting dark fast, and we hadn't seen a deer all day, so I was getting bored, staring out of one of the plastic windows in the blind that was facing towards the house. The window was filthy, but it was propped open to let in some cooler air. As I was sitting there staring out the window, I saw something. This thing. I just don't know what else to call it. At first, I thought it was a large dog. A large white dog, like a Great Dane or something. But it was far too long and tall for a Great Dane. From my distance, it looked to be about 7 feet tall. It had 4 long legs and seemed to have an almost graceful stride. I could not judge the height of the creature perfectly, due to the distance, and I could barely make out some of its features. But what really scared me, what really made my eyes wide and my heart almost stop, was the fact that it didn't look like a dog or any animal in the face. No, it looked more like a person. After staring at it for a long moment, I turned to my dad and whispered, "Hey, look at this." He turned around, probably thinking I'd seen a deer and hoping for the best, when he saw this thing as well. But all he did was glance at it then turn away, saying it must be a neighbor's dog. Maybe he was just disappointed that it wasn't a deer, and therefore didn't keep his interest as much as it did me. But I stared at the thing as it walked toward one of the garages, which had a large opening in the front and the back. Inside that garage were tractors and landscaping equipment. I really wish I'd thought to write it down as soon as I saw it, because now I can only remember fuzzy details. That's about all I can remember, but it was enough to shake me and to confirm to me that there are creatures out there, creatures ripped straight from the storybooks and the old legends. Number 4. Evil Spirit, or Wendigo. Submitted by Luke M. I was 12 years old when this happened, and I still don't fully understand exactly what happened to us. When I was in grade 6, I met a kid named Brody. We were into the same games, and he was already friends with my best friend Mason. So after we talked for a while, we began having lunch together, and the next thing I knew, he was inviting me and some friends over on the weekends to play PS2 and watch movies. We began chilling together all the time, and we were introduced to his friends from town. Let me go back a bit and say that we were from a rural community, outside of a decent-sized town with about 50,000 people, in northeastern Ontario, Canada. We went to public school with around 80 or 90 kids, and the kids from the city went to a Catholic school with more than 150 kids, which blew our young minds at the time. When our group of friends got together, we would often play manhunt in the woods and in the fields near Brody's house. For those who don't know what manhunt is, it's what we call hide-and-seek tag or army tag. Brody's property was perfect for this, because he had acres of woods in a long hilly field. We would wait until it was pitch black dark, grab some flashlights, and run around outside. We would do this all around the year, even when it was freezing in the Canadian winter. We would just dress up in snow pants instead, with huge jackets, just to hide in the snow. It was a lot of fun, until we began to have these encounters. The first encounter I had with this entity was the winter after I had started hanging out with them. There was 5 of us: me, Mason, Brody, and John and Travis, our city friends. We were bored one night and decided to go for a late night walk in the moonlight. It was so bright we didn't even need flashlights. In fact, the moonlight seemed always really bright at Brody's house. We walked for maybe 15 minutes before we came to a small clearing by a pond. There were large piles of grass and brush buried by the snow, and we thought they may have been dens by some kind of animal, but we weren't sure. We were talking about God knows what, probably Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 or something, when we could hear branches breaking nearby, probably a few dozen yards away. We stopped talking and looked around. We were assuming it was probably a coyote or a fisherman or something like that, so we decided to walk back to his house to be on the safe side. On the way back, though, we heard the same noise continue to follow us from about 24 yards now. Whatever this thing was, it was slinking through the brush quietly. You could only hear it if you really stopped and focused. We got scared from the noise, so we decided to loudly sing to try to scare it off. That may seem kind of silly or stupid, but we were scared back then, and remembered a presentation we saw once about bears. Apparently bears don't like loud noises, and you can use that to scare them off.
I'm not dead.
Eventually, we got back to Brody's house, and we warmed up with some hot chocolate by the fireplace, still a little freaked out. When that next summer came, we all decided we were going to make a fort. At that house there was a strange phenomenon. In the woods at least, time seemed to pass slower. We'd go out for what felt like hours and hours, but apparently only a few minutes would pass. We found the foundation of an old cabin off the side of Brody's field, and we decided to dig up where the doorway once stood. We ripped up old piles of logs that once made up the threshold of the place. This is what I think angered whatever spirits or entity was there. That same summer, we were all standing in Brody's front yard in the dark, just talking about either what we were going to do that night, or what we had done all week. Whatever the case was, we were standing there and chatting, when we looked around and noticed Travis had disappeared. Now, Travis did stuff like this all the time. He would hide when nobody was looking, and he'd make us look for him. I remember thinking it was annoying, but still a little funny, just because of how childish
Gene,
it was.
always check your oil levels.
So we split up in groups of 2, me and Mason and Brody and John. We went down to the field, and the other group checked the woods. Mason and I were walking down the field, scanning the area with our trusty LED flashlights, yelling
LED
things
flashlights.
like, "Oh, come on, Travis," and "Quit being an idiot and just get out here." We walked for a few minutes before we saw what appeared to be our friend, lying face first in the grass. He had on a brown or black sweater, and they had brown hair, just like Travis. So Mason yelled at him, "I see you, Travis, come on," and we started to run over to him. What appeared to be Travis got up and bolted into the woods, vanishing as soon as he hit the underbrush. That second, we then heard Brody and John yell at us, "We found him!" This was weird.
We found him.
We went back to the house nervously. Brody went on to explain that Travis was hidden between the car and the truck, and they said when they found him, he was joking about how he walked right past him and never even saw him. We asked him if that was him in the field.
That's how it is.
He said it couldn't have been.
That's how YouTube
because
is.
he would have been able to run like 300 meters a second.
People
to do
can't
that.
take dislikes.
Needless to say, we were pretty shaken up by that experience. One day we were outside the following winter, so it was about a year after we were followed by that thing. We were standing outside to get away from a party inside that was running long and was honestly painfully boring. We were standing on the dirt road when all of a sudden, our friend who had an insulin pump started complaining about it not working. I began to reach into my pocket and tried to use my flashlight that was in the bottom of my walkie-talkie, but it didn't work either. After about a minute of tinkering with this stuff, my walkie-talkie and her pump began working again, followed by this loud bang of a rock hitting the stop sign at the end of Brody's driveway. We all jumped when we heard it. Then we shone our flashlights at it and saw it was shaking from the impact of whatever was thrown. We all ran back inside, scared to death of what had just happened. The final experience I had with this spirit was in the spring or fall. I can't quite remember it exactly. I know it was raining a lot that day, and it was very warm outside. Warm enough that you didn't need a jacket.
Warm enough.
Me and Mason were at Brody's house
for
once
clarifying
again, chasing
story.
him around with a foam Nerf sword. He ran out the door at one point, and we soon lost sight of him. So we ran down the road looking for him when we suddenly heard bushes shaking. We could see the rustling underbrush in the ditch down towards the field. So we hopped into the trench and began yelling for Brody to come out so we could wail on him with the sword. We looked all around the brush to find him, but then the rain began to come down harder, and it was probably about 9 p.m., so it was too dark to keep going. We decided to go back inside and wait for him to come back. When we got to Brody's house, we saw him sitting in a chair beside his house. He said he turned the corner to fake us out, and he apparently went right back to the door. So he'd been there the whole time.
Well, you sure look like one Weebler.
Because of what we heard in those woods.
Oh boy, there you go.
The rain was pouring,
That's
and
right,
Brody
Chad.
told us he was going to go and have a shower inside. Mason said that we were going to stay out and enjoy the rain a bit longer. So me and Mason stood on the road, looking straight ahead towards a big hill that was right before his house. An extremely thick fog began to roll in, and we thought it was neat because it looked like some horror film. I looked at Mason and noticed he was staring deeply down the road, intently. I followed his gaze, and then I saw the single most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. It was the figure of a man, a tall, dark, bluey-black silhouette. It was slowly walking towards us and was only 200 yards away. Whatever this was, it was at least 7 feet tall, and its limbs were incredibly thin. It didn't seem naturally possible. I turned to Mason, and I said something to the effect of, "Do you see that?" And he nodded. "The shadowy thing coming right towards us?" He nodded again. "Come on, we need to go back inside," I said. All the while, I had this disgusting, warm, nauseous feeling in my gut, and I wanted to just get out of there. Mason just kept staring. The thing had disappeared to the bottom of the hill, but I knew it was still coming. It was just out of our view. I told Mason we had to go, but he still would not budge. I grabbed him by his arm and forced him towards the door. I remember him saying, "No one's ever been killed by a ghost," but I told him, "I don't want to be the first, if that's what it really is." We finally ran back inside, and the fog enveloped Brody's whole yard, and you couldn't see a thing outside.
Ow, ow, ow. Oh, I hit my computer with my hand. Ow.
Brody moved soon after that, and we hadn't been back since. I'm usually skeptical, and have no explanation for what we saw that night. This was probably 6 years ago, so I don't remember everything. But all of these events were impossible to completely forget. I don't know what's in those woods. If it's an evil spirit,
yes,
a
it's
demon,
an evil spirit
or
of
the Wendigo,
gambling.
I'm not sure. But I know that it doesn't like people. What scares me the most was the fact that it perfectly mimicked the shape of my friend. Whenever I was over there, I always felt like something was watching me.
My wrist still hurts for hitting my computer at an angle.
And number 5, my Wendigo encounter.
My Wendigo encounter by
Submitted
Paul
by
115.
Paul 115.
Ow.
What I'm about to tell you happened only a couple of weeks ago.
Will change your world.
I was going on a trip to my grandparents' place, which was about an hour-long drive. The road goes through a huge forest, nearly 45 minutes of the drive there. So I was leaving with my parents at around 6 p.m., and it was almost night. Through the whole drive, it was going to be night, we assumed. So half an hour went by, and it was pitch black outside.
Serves you right.
The only light there was from the moon and our headlights. Suddenly, as I was watching through the window,
really
I should mention
coming
here
from an
that we were going slow enough to avoid any
Italians don't have
slippery
big
turns.
Greek noses or nothing.
So as I was looking through the window, I soon regretted it. The corner of my eye caught something, and I immediately turned my head to its direction. And what I saw will mark my heart for my whole life. There in the dark woods was a pale, white figure, and thanks to the light of
My
the moon,
casual Wendigo
I was able
encounter.
to see this
Wink.
thing's face. And as we passed it, it moved its head towards me. I saw 2 red eyes. They were like portholes straight to hell. I was in terror. The creature let out this high-pitched, squeaky scream, and I wasn't the only one that heard it. My mom and dad then looked in the direction of the scream to see the creature now standing on its hind legs, and the thing was easily at least 1 foot taller than my dad. I suddenly felt the car yank as my dad shifted it into high gear. The
But don't worry,
creature
we've got
screamed again,
another
then
whole
ran
thing
into
of
the
him reading
woods on
5
all
more stories
fours.
to go through.
We were
Not
petrified.
next, but after that.
The rest of the way there, we heard branches breaking. This thing must have been climbing through the trees and easily keeping pace with us. When we got to my grandparents' place, I told them right away what we had seen, and all of us were asking at once, what is going on? After we got inside and locked all the doors and windows, we repeated our story, but our grandparents weren't too worried, it seemed. They were more curious than anything. They asked us, "Are you sure of what you saw?" My dad said 100% sure.
100 billion%
At the moment,
sure.
I couldn't help but look out the windows. I thought at any moment I could see those red eyes again, so I held tight to my dad's leg.
Taste it.
My dad asked my grandparents if they knew what the thing was, and they answered without hesitation. It was a Wendigo. We all stayed in the living room that night, huddled together while my dad and grandpa both held 12-gauge shotguns. I soon fell asleep, but a few hours later, I was awoken by a noise. When I sat up and looked around, I saw that everyone was awake too, and everyone was looking at the door. I turned to the front door to see that the doorknob was shaking. Something on the other side was trying to open the door. After about an hour of the door shaking, it stopped. Needless to say, none of us went back to sleep after that.
None of us. Nobody ever went back to sleep ever. They stayed up forever.
Beware
Right.
the...
We're moving on. Next. Terrified
Good
Native
people
American
do
tales.
bad things. Find out in the new season
that
of the
weave.
hit psychological mystery
Look.
series Evil, now streaming on its new home on Paramount Plus.
Oh god, no.
The drama
Don't
from
do that.
creators Robert and Michelle King examines the
Robert and
origins
Michelle
of
King.
evil along the dividing line between science and religion.
Science.
Katja
religion.
Herbers plays Kristen, a skeptical female psychologist who joins a priest in training played by Mike Coulter and a contractor played by Asif Manvi,
Who?
as they investigate the church's backlog of unexplained mysteries, including supposed miracles, demonic possessions, and hauntings. To assess if there's a logical explanation or if something truly supernatural is at work, they'll dive deep into the dark, strange, and unexplainable. In the new season, the trio's journey continues with new challenges. Kristen wrestles with her own dark side, while David is met with temptation, and Ben experiences night terrors based on his fears. What's really lurking behind life's darkest forces? It's a season
Not
full of
good.
more
It's gonna be
questions,
bad.
more demons, and more evil. Exclusively on Paramount Plus. Head to
God.
ParamountPlus.com/evil to try it free.
Feel harder.
Hey, I'm Markia. Want to hear something scary?
I'm already terrified.
Curse of the Wendigo. A change of scenery is often just what is needed to break free from the shackles of bad habits. However, some bad habits can be so deeply ingrained that without help, they can break you. Shania was a natural-born hustler.
Great.
Once she knew there was money to be made, she couldn't stop until she got all of it. Unfortunately,
money.
she often did this at the expense of her family.
Well, duh.
This time, she'd realized she could make a profit by selling the clothes her sister had pushed farthest back in her closet.
Okay.
But things went too far when Shania decided she could get more selling the items her sister had just bought instead.
Oh boy.
Her parents were furious. They sent her to her uncle Kamal to work at his
Kamal.
animal training center in Manitoba, Canada for the summer. Her parents hoped that if she learned to train animals, then maybe she would learn some discipline herself. Uncle Kamal's Animal Center, along with the usual training services, also took in previously wild and or hurt animals.
Okay.
One large albino fox, named Kane, took a special liking to Chenoo. The large snow-white fox had 3 legs and beautiful amethyst eyes and followed her everywhere. Her uncle's home and training facility were surrounded by dense woods that were teeming with wildlife. But there was something about the woods that made Chenoo very uneasy. At night, she would hear the sounds of the animals and then sudden silence. When that happened, she'd frequently glimpse antlers slowly moving past her window in the distance.
Antlers.
The white fox Kane began coming into her room at night to sleep on her bed. And while it was cute at first, it started to keep her up at night as he growled and barked at whatever was prowling outside.
Oh no, things are going on.
Unable to find any lasting peace at her uncle's sanctuary, she returned to the thing she knew best.
Hustling.
Making money. She figured out that she could ask Uncle Kamal's clients to pay for their training sessions in cash, claim they had canceled the session, but actually reschedule them for after the summer. She'd then pocket that money. Soon, she'd amassed a tidy summer fortune, but she wanted more.
Of course, she wants more money.
Her usual greed was different here. It grew and permeated other parts of her life. She developed an insatiable appetite for meat. No matter how much she ate, the hunger only grew.
She turned into a Wendigo.
One day, soon after that, everything changed. Uncle Kamal was bitten by one of the dogs. And horrifyingly, the smell of his bloody wound was enticing to her.
Oh no.
Upon realizing that, she was overcome with panic and fear. Terrified of her growing changes, she bolted to her room and searched the internet. She discovered the First Nations legend of the Wendigo. A Wendigo was an evil creature that slowly possessed the greedy, pushing them to revel in their greed and also cannibalistic desires. The curse of the Wendigo was horrific indeed.
Horrific.
Suddenly, she heard growling and looked up from her laptop to find Kane. When she reached out to pat him, he snapped at her before running away. Chenoo pursued Kane, but was stopped by her bandaged, limping uncle. With a stern and disappointed look, he told her he'd found out about all of her canceled clients. He'd called them, and they all told him a very different story from hers. Chenoo realized just how greedy she'd become, caught in this latest hustling scheme. Tears streamed down her cheeks and she ran off instead, deep into the woods.
Oh no.
Something rustled in the bushes ahead of her. Kane emerged, aggressive and snarling. Every one of the fox's white hair stood on end as he growled. His amethyst-like eyes flared, and he leaped right at Chenoo. She screamed as Kane flew past her and attacked the antlered beast creeping up behind her.
The antlered beast.
It was the Wendigo. The gaunt, ash-gray-skinned creature's hide stretched taut over its tall, nearly skeletal frame, eyes deep in its sockets and stinking of death. It tried to throw the fox away with its antlered head, but Kane was too fast and continuously savaged the creature's throat and face. A very human-like scream ripped from its bloody, tattered lips as Kane continued his attack. Finally, the claws of the Wendigo slashed into the fox, and as he yelped, Chenoo ran for her life. The screams of the creatures echoed behind her as she ran through the woods back towards her uncle's place. She thought the fox defending her might mean that there was still hope to free herself of the curse of the Wendigo. But with every step, her greed and hunger grew. Her skin turned a mottled gray before her eyes as she felt antlers pushing to break free from her skull. And she had only one desire: to eat human flesh.
Oh no.
She tried to resist, but she could smell her uncle's blood on the air. She heard a familiar growl and looked up to see the large, battle-worn albino fox, bathed in red from Wendigo blood. As he leapt at her, fangs bared, Chenoo smiled in relief. Kane couldn't save her, but at least he'd save her uncle from her.
Oh no.
You know, it's funny. Of all the things I've been missing over the past year, it's the little things I miss the most. Like making eye contact across the room or connecting with strangers in line. That's what I'm trying to get back to.
Totally do.
Vaccination is the most effective way.
Oh, fuck off. Vaccination. Fuck off. Of course, that's the... Fuck you. Oh, vaccination's the clearest way. Fuck off. Yes. Heads up, we detected copyrighted audio from your video stream. It's that shitty music. Her nose is elongated, hooked. Next video. Vax hole, yeah. Vagot. Fuck off, lady, yeah. Yeah, the little things. Oh, Lord. I'm waiting for this copyright thing to go away. Get your shot, lol. Yeah. Oh, Lord. Sorry, chat. Just waiting for that to go away because that music. Fucking shield cultist. Yeah, exactly, Con. Exactly. Anyway, let's listen to some scary stories. Some more.
Today, we're talking about a pale, thin creature that lurks in the woods at night. Sounds like my biography. This world is a strange one. There's a lot of confusion about what a Wendigo really is. Some people think they're pale gray creatures like the rake. Others believe they are tall beasts that have a deer skull as a head. Well, both are correct. Wendigo have been illustrated and seen in both varieties, and they both want the same thing: your flesh. Let's listen to these allegedly true sightings of real Wendigo. Just remember, if you've got a scary story of your own, you can submit it at reddit.com/r/darknessprevails. We're currently still looking for some creepy stories about pizza deliveries. Number 1. Crawl Space. Submitted by Quarrel. Way back when, I lived in the woods with my grandparents. I must have been 13 years old at the time. Old enough to know that there was nothing in the dark to be scared of, but young enough to know that that wasn't true. The house was old and always creeped me out. Every little step you took made the wood creak. Everything was eerily silent at night, and the only sound you'd hear was the howling of a coyote in the nearby woods. What really freaked me out about this house, though, was that in my room, there was an attic crawl space just above my head. The door to it was always just above me when I lay in bed. I'd had nightmares before of things opening up that crawl space when I was asleep, only to slither down and watch me.
Slither
or
down.
Worse.
Slither.
One morning, I woke up to the sound of my grandfather's hammer. He was swinging away at the front part of the roof. Some darn animal had gnawed its way in, leaving a big hole there. He said it must have been a rat or something of the sort. I didn't think much of it. Rather, I laughed at how funny it was to see my grandpa so flustered at a little rat hole. On closer inspection, the hole was about the size of a human head, so it was quite a bit of damage for a rat. Maybe a group of rats, I thought, or maybe the infamous Rat King. I shivered at the thought, then smiled. The day went by slow and normal. Nothing happened out of the ordinary. I helped my grandpa patch up the hole. I helped my grandma tend to the cucumbers in the garden. We had some early supper of chicken and dumplings, and before I knew it, it was time for bed again. I remember that night being hot, and my grandparents' air conditioning unit was already too small for the big farmhouse. What air was blowing into my room still had me overheating, so I left my windows open. Nothing wrong with that. were far from the city, and our neighbors were kind and quiet farmers, so I figured nobody would want to break in.
Nobody will want to break in.
Somehow
clearly.
The air cooled faster with the open windows rather than the air conditioner. But it was cooler now, and I wasn't about to complain. I slipped into bed, and I quickly fell asleep. I woke up some time later. It was still dark out, as I could see the darkness through the windows. It was just as quiet as it always was, except tonight even the coyotes were silent. I scanned my room, yet everything still appeared normal. I was wondering what woke me up, and just as I was lying back down to sleep, I heard it. The sliding of wood against wood. It was coming from directly above me. With my head flat on the pillow, I looked up. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt like I was going to choke. The panel that covered the entrance to the crawlspace, it was opening. Something in the attic crawlspace was sliding the panel off. I could feel sweat drenching my body as I lay there, frozen and terrified. I wasn't ready to see what was on the other side, but I was too afraid to move. Soon the panel was completely off, leaving a black empty square in the ceiling above me. I stared into that darkness for a long time. The wait was almost the worst part. Almost. Because then I heard the breathing. Heavy, slow breathing. Not a moment later, a hand with dirty long nails appeared on the frame as the thing in the attic began to lower itself down. I saw two hands now, both ending in sharp nails. I saw long arms no thinner than the bones inside them. Then I saw the face, a face that was nearly a skull. There was no hair at all on its body, and there was barely any flesh on top of its bones. What I saw was a gaping mouth, two slits for a nose, and eyeless holes that peered deep into my soul. Now I was choking, gasping for air that just wouldn't come in. I watched the thing descend closer and closer towards me. It inched ever closer to my bed. I stopped trying to breathe. I shut my eyes and collected myself. Then I screamed. The creature flinched, not expecting the sound I'd just made, and in seconds' time, my grandpa burst through my bedroom door, carrying his shotgun.
Oh boy.
He and the creature exchanged a quick and confused glance before it yanked itself back into the crawlspace. A second later, we heard a massive breaking sound from outside, followed by loud footsteps scurrying into the forest. My grandpa ran outside. I would later find out that the creature was gone, but now the patch in the roof had basically exploded, and the hole had been busted open, much wider than before. Whatever it was made its escape through that hole, but something tells me it had made that hole its entrance as well.
No shit, you don't say.
The entire day, it had been in that attic, waiting for some sinister purpose, and what it was, I have no clue. It was a mesh of all things nightmares are made of, stitched together in one sinewy, skeletal construct, a creature that had been lowering itself onto me from the ceiling. Number 2, Monster in Boggy Creek.
Oh, Boggy Creek!
Submitted by Rosemore1117.
Oh, Boggy Creek. I know that place well.
I'm from a small town in southwest Arkansas called Folk, famous for the Boggy
More
Creek
like
monster.
Folk you, sir.
This monster is said to be a Sasquatch who in the 70s allegedly terrorized my hometown and the surrounding area, thus spawning the documentary, The Legend of Boggy Creek.
Yeah, we know.
I've sadly never seen this large ape-like wonder, but have seen first-hand evidence of it, and far worse monsters out in the swamps and hills my family and I have hunted in our entire lives. There are a multitude of stories I could tell here, but the one that bothers me the most, the reason I no longer feel safe in the backwoods of my own homeland, began one evening when I was 15. Where we live, despite what wildlife officials of any form will admit, there are numerous dangerous and large animals. The razorback boar can gore a man's leg deep enough to cripple them.
Yes,
or
I know
kill
what a razorback
if it gets
boar
you on
is.
the ground. Gators can grow to just about any length, and the only thing they fear is a bigger gator. And then there are panthers. We've heard and witnessed panthers kill and haul a calf weighing well over double their size straight up into a tree, gnawing at it for days. They scream like terrified women and can move silently through brush or outright overtake almost anything. Quite frankly, they unnerve me, but what I found on my own deer lease close to a decade ago has shaken me ever since.
Ooh,
I never walked those woods unarmed, and I never will. I'm a big guy at 200 pounds or more, and an easy 6'2". And while hunting, I always carried a Winchester 7mm, a Taurus Judge revolver loaded with buckshot or homemade rounds, and kukri for brush or emergencies. Nothing, I believed, could stand back up from a straight round from my rifle. But whatever this was, my rifle didn't even faze it. I followed what I thought to be a hog trail up a hill near a distant stand we used during the second day of the deer season. I had never seen such an easy game trail in my life, and to be honest, I was relieved, as I only had about an hour of daylight left. And then I found the blood. Not much, but enough to know something was hurt. I could physically see the signs of the poor thing being dragged along, with bits of tissue and sizable amounts of blood coating the ground every few feet. I hit the crest of a hill, and at the bottom, I found what I thought was going to be it. A leg lying there before me. From there, I could see that the kill was fresh, with steam coming off of the severed end of the remains. The hog's tracks and blood showed less than 2 hours, and it had to have been more than 100 pounds. I fired my rifle in the air twice to signal for help, then I searched the area. Whatever had attacked it, the poor animal could not put up a fight, and the thing that had killed it didn't leave a single track of its own. I found a small blood trail leading off from the area, and I left something personal there to clue the others. By this point, I had half an hour of daylight left, so I used my kukri to mark a tree every few feet as I walked. Within 10 minutes, I found the rest of the boar that had been slain, but it wasn't alone. Dozens of bodies were there, ranging from deer, pigs, cattle, and dogs, and there was even a dead panther. It was like some sick display. So, remembering it as I am now, I make the joke that it was a garden. A crimson, fetid garden, made in the deepest parts of the woods, where no man should be foolish enough to wander. Suddenly, I heard a noise, and snapped out of my horror-stricken state. I quickly chambered around, and caught a glimpse of my assailant. It was thin, pale, and grayish-white. Its eyes were solid black, and it had long claws that were still wet. It tucked behind a tree and appeared 10 feet closer without making a single sound. It was like it had just materialized right there, 20 feet from me. I wasn't about to give it a chance to get closer. I took aim, and I fired. I saw it hit, but it must have gone straight through. Or so I thought. There was no blood, no hole, just the muzzle flash, and the thing flinched. I know I hit it, but there was no telling that I did. So I fired another.
Fire another.
This
Fire
time,
all the bullets.
The creature didn't flinch. Instead, it showed its teeth to me. But then I pulled out my magnum. That thing left nothing standing at that range, much less anything smirking. Its hollow eyes stared at me. A big razor-toothed smile jutted across its face. A mouth that was easily twice as big as a man's. And then it moved. I can see the thing in my nightmares even now. because the way it moved, it was unnatural. It shuffled, I think is the word. It shuffled forward with a strange posture. Its arms almost double the length of a man's, though it stood as tall as me, and its legs were canine-like in nature. It moved almost awkwardly while walking on its feet and
Awkward
knuckles.
walking.
As I took aim down the
Like a
sights
drunk.
of my magnum, the creature was in touching distance in front of me. I was so frightened that I dropped my gun. I fell backward, and that's when I realized this was it. I was going to be some backwoods art project for this demonic creature. And that's when I heard the shotgun from behind me and towards the right,
That's
from the
when I heard
trail
it.
that I had marked. My father, my uncle, and a close family friend had
My
been
uncle
nearby,
father.
wondering
This is
where I
the South,
was
right?
when they heard my shots. They opened fire on this thing with 2 hunting rifles and a shotgun at nearly point-blank range, but it still didn't show a single wound. It looked towards them, then back to me. Then it bolted away, vanishing into the deep woods. My dad helped me up and looked at me dead in the eyes, saying something, but my mind couldn't process it. There was no going back to camp that night. I was in my pickup and on my way home in the next hour. When we made it back to town, I was finally recovering from my shock. My dad and uncle sat down beside me to talk once we got home, and I got cleaned up. These men were veterans, special forces, yet still they looked as pale as I was. My dad gave me a cup of coffee and said that none of the rest of the people I know on this earth need to know
Nobody
what's
needs to
out
know.
there. He knew the game warden, and they would take care of things. As for what I saw, he only had this to say. Your great-grandpa knew the Indians that lived in these parts, and they used to
Your
warn us of evil
great-grandpa.
spirits.
All the evil
Your
spirits.
grandpa won't hunt anymore because of something he saw as a young man.
Demons, son.
I've seen men die firsthand, and yet something I saw when I was a boy still wakes me up at night. All of us have seen things we can't explain. You, son, you got lucky. I got lucky that I
We
didn't
all
lose my
got
son
lucky,
tonight.
son.
So you take as long as you need to talk
Seemed.
about it, okay? The next day, 30 armed men, including a preacher, scoured those
Preacher?
woods
Oh,
as
no.
my dad picked up our gear and told them where he last saw the thing.
Just need for speed.
Officials bought and closed off the land without saying a word to anyone as to why. It all disappeared, and after a few months of therapy, I was doing pretty well. Now I only wonder 2 things. What was going to happen to me? And when will I stop dreaming of whatever that thing was? Now that I'm a father myself, neither my boys nor I go out into the woods alone, because personally, I know somewhere out there that thing is still waiting, and I'm going to be sure that my son is not its next victim. Number 3. Wendigo Backstage.
Wendigo backstage
Submitted
at a
by
concert? What?
Comedy Tragedy 99.
Comedy tragedy. Wow. Bro, don't cut yourself on that edge.
I'm a young actress from the East
course-
Coast
oh,
of the
never mind.
United States.
You're a woman.
I've grown up
no
listening
wonder.
to tales of monsters and spirits in the woods, but I'd never really encountered one myself. Not until that fateful December night. A performance in which I was the leading lady had just ended, and I was backstage changing out of my costume. The show in which I starred was Andrew Lloyd Webber's Tony Award-winning musical, The Phantom of the Opera, so it's a bit ironic. My friend Matthew played the role of the Phantom, and he did an outstanding job with his performance. A little bit of background info for you about Matthew. He's a talented actor and singer, but when he's not on stage, he's either pulling a practical joke on somebody or flirting with me.
Oh, great.
I like Matthew, but at times I find him to be rather annoying and unprofessional. On this particular night, I just finished changing out of my costume. I tend to take a while to put everything in its proper place, so as usual, I ended up being the last person to leave the theater.
Great.
As I locked my dressing room door and prepared to leave, I distinctly heard the shuffling of footsteps behind me. I quickly spun around to try and spot the culprit, but there was no one there. Just come out here, Matthew, I yelled into the darkened wings. No response came. Now I was annoyed. Matthew, this isn't funny, I yelled even louder. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw next. From out of the pitch-black wings emerged a tall, pale and gaunt figure that somehow appeared human, but wasn't at the same time. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with Matthew, even if I wished I was now. It didn't matter that no one would hear me. I still screamed as loud as I possibly could at the sight of this creature. The thing stood at about 7.5 feet tall. Its arms were around 1.5 meters in length. It had claws at the end of each arm, with eyes that glowed like a pair of burning embers. And even stranger yet, it had antlers on its head that looked more at home on a deer. I stood there frozen out of sheer terror for what seemed like minutes, but only could have been a few seconds. What was this thing? How in the world did it get inside the building? Something like this shouldn't exist. What finally broke my trance was when the creature sprinted for the exit. In moments, the encounter was over, and the beast was gone. I quickly got in my car and drove home, in complete shock at what I had just seen. When I got home, I did a little bit of research on the entity, and the only creature I found that matches would be the Wendigo. But it still made no sense how a freaking Wendigo got backstage at an opera house.
Yeah, how did that happen?
To get back there,
how the fuck did you manage that, Wendigo?
I simply hope I never see it again. Maybe burning some sage in my dressing room will help keep it away.
I mean, maybe.
What I've heard, the Wendigo can be an evil spirit.
Maybe.
And those spirits hate the aroma of sage. Number 4. Wendigo Sighting. Submitted by Justin B.
Great. Tell me all about it.
I've always been the paranoid type. If I heard a noise in the dark, I'd jump to the conclusion that it was something that was here to hurt me. But what I experienced on June 17th of 2017, it will never leave my memory, and it wasn't just paranoia. I've never done drugs or had any type of alcohol.
You are the drugs.
I continue to keep it that way. But me and my 2 brothers and parents all decided to move away from our old town after our uncle died, just to start anew. We found a nice 5-bedroom house that would fit all of us. It was surrounded by woods, and it was always quiet. The nearest neighbor was about 90 meters away.
Chills, but you know.
The second week of us moving, me and my bigger brother Brandon decided to go to a creek that we had found the first day of moving in. We followed the path that we had made from prior visits, and we went into the woods, finally reaching the creek. It was a nice little stream. Occasionally you could see some fish swim by, but not today. Because that day, the creek seemed wrong. There were no birds chirping, nothing, just the sound of water calmly flowing through. I could tell my brother was getting scared, as I was too. So I suggested we should probably leave. But him, being the bigger brother, who wasn't supposed to be scared, said that we should stay for a while. But I sure as crap didn't want to. It had been only a couple of minutes when we started to smell something awful. Imagine rotten meat had been left out in the heat and sprayed by a skunk.
Oh great.
Then you might have an idea of what it smelled like. We started to get sketched out and finally decided to leave. We began to head down the trail. Before we made it out, my brother had to stop to pee. He walked no more than 10 meters behind a bush to take care of his business when I began to hear a scratching sound from behind me. I turned to see what was making the strange noise, and I was met with the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. A tall, almost 10-foot figure stood behind a tree, about 5 meters away from me. It poked out half of its body from the tree, and it was staring right at me.
Right at me.
It had pale white skin with patches of fur scattered all over its body. There were large antlers on its head, and its head looked almost like a deer's skull. But the thing that scared me the most was it was whimpering my name. It was saying, Justin.
Justin.
Justin. It kept repeating my name. I screamed louder than I've ever screamed before, and my brother suddenly ran to my side.
Here. I'm looking at the time.
But when he saw the thing, he just grabbed me by the arm and began dragging me as he ran. We never looked back.
That tab too.
We slammed open the door to our house, screaming and babbling. Our parents rushed over to us.
One video for the other thing that's not the Wendigo, the Chenoo.
I was trying to explain what happened.
Yeti stuff.
But I could barely breathe at all.
Then we got the.
My brother was just quiet, staring out of the living room window.
Sorry.
My parents checked what he was looking at.
The Scottish.
There,
myth.
outside the window, was the same creature from the woods. Instead of grabbing the shotgun we had next to the fireplace, my dad said to run to the car, and we all left the house as fast as we could. We never moved out of that house, unfortunately, and I've never even touched a tree belonging to those woods again. We moved not too long after that. Soon I made new friends, and I was able to tell them this story. But they didn't seem to have a clue what it was. Not until I asked my new best friend Adam, when he began to show me stories of a creature called the Wendigo. Number 5. Wendigo in the Catskills. Submitted by Ken H. My name is Ken. I'm a 20-year-old guy from the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York. To give some background, I live on my own in a pretty secluded area. Plus, I'm now a former hunter and outdoorsman. You'll understand why I said former in a moment. It all began when I was out deer hunting one day after a long work day. My property is situated on 50 acres of dense forest, which is a hotspot for wildlife. I was sitting in my tree stand with my Marlin 30-30 lever-action rifle. As the afternoon was progressing to evening, I wasn't having any luck with seeing any deer, and strangely, the forest was eerily quiet the entire time. Normally, there is active wildlife everywhere in these woods, but there was not a soul to be seen. After around 3 hours of seeing nothing, I got sick of it. I was thinking by then I've had enough of this, that it was about time to head home. Since it was about 20 minutes before nightfall, I then climbed down from my tree stand. When my feet touched the ground, I took my rifle attached to the strap off my shoulder back into my hands. I proceeded to start making the 200-yard walk home. That's when I began to hear rustling in the leaves close by. I turned around and paused. Through the trees, about 60 yards away, I could just make out the outline of what appeared to be a deer's head. It was moving in my direction. As it stepped closer, I then saw the antlers on its head. They were huge. Immediately, I felt excited. I've been waiting all day for a trophy buck like that, and I might just bring one home after all. This deer was standing broadside at about 40 yards away. I steadied my rifle against a small tree, lined up the iron sights for a double lung shot. Then I fired. The rifle discharged, releasing the loud explosion of a 150 grain 30-30 bullet. I saw the deer fall right there.
The deer is dead.
I had a brief
now.
moment of excitement. I even gave myself a thumbs up, whispering,
"Wow, great."
Yes.
You gave yourself
But
a
that
thumbs
excitement
up.
was short-lived.
Give yourself
as
two
what
thumbs
I thought
up.
was a deer began to growl and stood back up, this time on 2 legs. Now the outline became clear to me as an unbroken beam of fading sunlight hit the face of the creature. There was no flesh on its head.
No flesh.
Its head was only a deer's skull. My jaw dropped. I couldn't even begin to comprehend what I was seeing. I even said it out loud. Are you freaking kidding me? That beast turned to face me, and my God, the image of it will forever be burned into my mind. It glared at me with those eyeless sockets. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was a creature straight from fables, right out of my nightmares. It began to move closer, but I was still frozen to my spot. Every passing moment I could tell more and more that this thing looked nothing like a deer, and that I had made a huge mistake. It was now about 30 yards away. It had already covered half the distance between us, and I had yet to move. But now I could see it. It was easily 7 feet tall. It had arms that were very long and thin, with fingers that curled backwards, but I was sure that they ended in claws. But its torso, it made no physical sense at all, because it appeared to be already half-eaten. It was heading towards me still at a slow yet confident pace. I finally snapped out of my trance when it was about 20 yards away, but I dropped my rifle. My mind wouldn't let me think normally. I didn't think that I should have carried my gun with me. Instead, my body took over. I turned, and my legs carried me away.
More like instinct.
I was only 200 yards from my house, but I could hear this monster now behind me, giving chase, and it was coming much faster than before. I didn't dare to look back. I managed to make it back to the back door of my house, and thank God I had left it unlocked. I burst inside, slammed the door behind me, and locked it, and I still didn't look back. I don't think I had the courage to look back. I ran into my bedroom and slammed the door. I locked that one too, and then I fell to my knees. I was shaking profusely, breathing very rapidly for air.
So rapidly.
And I began to cry uncontrollably. A grown man, a hunter, an outdoorsman,
stays chill
was
somehow.
Sitting there crying my eyes out.
Look at that Wendigo.
It took me a while to pull myself together after that.
The Last of Us? Is that
I did not sleep at all that night. I didn't want to close my eyes until I saw the morning sun rise, lighting up my bedroom. After that, I went out only to retrieve my rifle. Even so, I was extremely hesitant to go back outside, to step 1 foot into those woods. I found my rifle pretty quickly, and lo and behold, the forest was abundant with wildlife once more, as if nothing was out of place, like nothing had ever happened. Luckily, I never saw that monster again, and I haven't told anyone this story.
As some people like to call it, until yawn.
Even writing this story now,
boring.
I shake, and I feel like I'm being watched. Just reliving the terrifying moment. It gives me chills. I don't go hunting anymore, and I probably won't again anytime soon. I hope none of you ever have to run into the thing that I did that night.
I mean, hopefully you don't. Anyway, let's move on from this. We got this shit.
Now, if you missed the first part of this video, then I'll quickly reintroduce you to the evil that is the Wendigo.
Stories.
The Wendigo is this mythological evil spirit or creature-like thing that hails from folklore of the First Nations, Algonquin tribes in Canada and the US. But the spirit alone can possess a human and make them do horrible things like murder, become a cannibal, become incredibly
That's horrible now? Wow,
so
judgmental.
They're not a creature you want to see in any part of your day, whether it's daylight, nighttime, in an alleyway, just never.
Is this shirt gonna show her
guys?
cleavage?
Hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host, Eamon
Kinda, her hair's in the way.
Another video. Now, I'm trying to think of what I would do if I ever ran into one, but in every scenario I imagine, it just kills me in seconds anyway, so what really even is the point? Anyway, guys, let's just get straight into this one. These are the top 10 scary Wendigo stories, part 2. Starting off with number 10 is The Thing. This one comes from Reddit user Teo2025, who's part of the Algonquin tribe from his dad's side. The user and his friends went on a camping trip to New Jersey and
yes, Jenny, the Algonquin people from Canada.
Camping stuff like listening to music, smoking, playing games, etc. And by 1 a.m., everyone was getting ready to go to bed.
I know, you're possibly part Algonquin, Jenny. That means you're a Wendigo. Congratulations.
He looked outside the window to see this tall figure with glowing blue eyes just staring
good censorship, just so you can get monetized.
Now, obviously, at this point, anyone would their pants, and so did the user. He quickly woke up his Native American friend Jack, who knew straight away that it was a Wendigo. He told everyone to get down as the thing came inside and started pacing and growling. After 10 tense minutes of this, it finally opened the cabin door and disappeared back into the night. After that, the boys could not sleep a wink because all they could hear were the screams of smaller animals coming from the woods. In the morning, they found a giant deer carcass outside the cabin, which meant they were this close to having the same fate as that deer the night before. Coming in at number 9 is Kira. Now, this one was shared by Redditor Bedhead126, whose real name is Kira, and this story happened while she was on a trip to Austin. Late one night, her and her family were seeing some friends when Kira decided to walk past her backyard and into the forests behind it.
Where these are just there.
Everyone had gone inside to eat at this point, so she was there alone, and she just sat in the woods alone, just thinking, because Kira likes that Whatever, I'm not going to judge you, Kira, but being in the woods alone is usually how people die, mate. Have you never seen a horror movie? Have you never seen a top 10 video? Either way, after a while,
top 10 video, yeah, people just go out for these, totally.
She had a log break behind her, and she still wasn't really scared. Then she had a screaming in the distance, and it sounded like her little sister, but it just couldn't have been since she was inside the house. Finally, she was like, maybe it's not safe and I should go back home, so she started walking back while continuously looking over her shoulder. And then she saw it. This massive, deformed, deer-looking creature, a mere 5 feet away from her, just drooling. She started running at the speed of light, and the noises that came out from the creature's mouth were just indescribable. She said they were horrifying, inhuman, and Kira claimed she felt them in her bones. She continued to hear the noises all throughout the night,
like
even when she was back home. At number 8, we have The Hunt. So this one was shared by Reddit user Lick My Taint, and it takes place when 16 years old and on a fishing trip with
thanks Reddit. Lick My Taint.
The fishing area was 1.5 miles away from New York's house, and the date was going pretty well. Everyone was having a good preface this, one of the friends, Brian, is part of the Nevada. One of the friends, Brian, is part well, everyone was having a good time. The fishing area was... This one was shared by Reddit user Lick My Taint, and it takes place when he was 16 years old and on a fishing trip with 4 friends in Hamlin, New York. The fishing area was 1.5 miles away from the nearest house, and the date was going pretty well. Everyone was having a good time, just chilling and smoking.
Probably on the fucking the city area. I have no idea where a lot of places are.
Brian is part of the Navajo tribe.
That's because I don't live close to there. Oh, I'm closer to both Ohio and Pennsylvania than I'm ever closer to New York City.
A pack of coyotes. Freaked out, the boys decided to walk home while semi-drunk. Don't know how that seemed like a good idea, but alright lads. Either way, a quarter of the way back, Brian stops walking and just becomes white with fear. The user asked him what was wrong, and Brian grabbed him by the wrist and turned him towards the field. In it, they saw these menacing pair of eyes the size of footballs looking back at them. The two decided to keep it quiet so the others wouldn't freak out, but halfway home, the pack of dogs seemed to be following them, and something in the cornfield near them was also tailing them as the cops were going down like something was in them. They finally got back to Brian's house and got a gun, because that's America. And they
shut up. Shut up. Don't ever say that again.
They were being hunted by Wendigo, and that's why they grabbed the gun. But I mean, this is America, so I mean, people just grab guns for no reason, right? Following on number 7 spot is the camera footage. Back in November of 2013, YouTube channel Shimmy Jim Hog uploaded a video titled The Most Disturbing Video You Will Ever See. It starts off with some text about how around 1:30 a.m. at night, they began to hear noises on their roof, and that continued for a few days. The video then starts, and you can see the person filming his house in the dark, and as he goes outside around 1 minute into the video, the camera pans upwards towards the roof, and you see this creature. This humanoid-looking creature with shining eyes eyes that quickly disappears when it realizes it's been seen. It wasn't making any noise whatsoever, but it had a large bald head, and its eyes looked like shining beacons of death, no cap. My guesses are it was either a Wendigo or a Wendigo-possessed human, neither of which I have time for, personally. Now, number 6 are the Roseau sightings. Between the late 1800s and 1920s, locals of a small town called Roseau in Minnesota reported sightings of the Wendigo. Now, every time anyone in town saw it, someone would unexpectedly die soon after. Now, not much is known about the sightings or why they occurred, but they eventually stopped, as did the deaths, and everything just kind of went back to normal. That one was short and sweet, but honestly I couldn't find more information about it, you guys. Coming in at number 5 is You, shared by Hellfire Narrations on Reddit. The user said she went on her usual daily midnight stroll to the forest by her house. First of all, who's taking that daily midnight stroll to the forests? Nobody. Either way, as soon after she got there, the warm air around her suddenly turned cold and she felt like she was being watched. Despite turning around and yelling hello, she saw and heard nothing out of the ordinary. Feeling a bit stupid and paranoid, she brushed off and went further into the woods. When she looked back the next time, she saw these white creepy eyes looking at her from behind some shrubbery.
Some white
the
creepy eyes.
Insanely
Are they creepy because they're white?
Teeth and pointed shiny fingernails. She knew it was a Wendigo straight away and ran the hell away as fast as she possibly could. The user had lost the creature a while back, but she was sobbing like crazy. When she looked into the creature's eyes, this creepy voice in her head said this. A long time ago, I was created to haunt you, to fear you and lead you into dark corners. These times are over now since you can't escape. I am you, but changed to a horrifying monster. She was the Wendigo. The Wendigo was her. She screamed at the realization, but her voice went from being shrill and human to being monstrous. At number 4 are the marks, shared by Reddit user WubbyBubby247. One night the user and his friend decided to go biking down this dirt road that was in desperate need of major maintenance. I'm talking potholes, little fires, deep holes, and so on. When they got to the tiny fire pit, they lit it as per usual, but they had a faint noise in the background, kind of like a disaster siren. Now the noise was getting louder and louder, and sounded like it was coming towards the boys, but the direction of the sound was also the only way back home. The boys started running in the woods that lined the dirt road, and as soon as they turned the corner, they saw it. A gigantic, towering figure in the darkness just staring at them. They obviously ran the other way and finally got home, not thinking much of anything. But when the boy woke up the next morning, he was freezing and had 3 long claw marks across his chest that were bleeding. His friend had woken up with the same thing. They decided to go back to the woods here and there to investigate, I don't know why, and each time they'd hear the siren and be chased out by this tall figure that was way too fast and ugly to be human. Filling in 3 are the Nightmares Part 1. This one comes from Reddit user GameRight420.
GameRight420.
Had a very weird nightmare about the Wendigo.
GameNight420. I can't tell what you said.
She didn't even know what a Wendigo was at that age or what they even looked like. Either way, in it she was in the woods and she saw this giant creature with a deer skull for a head staring at her. Nothing happened. It was just a lot of staring back and forth and a lot of cold air. Now a few years later she had the second dream, and again she was in some foggy forest and the Wendigo was just plain staring at her. But in the third dream, the figure actually walked towards her in this forest. Its sockets were so deep and black and was breathing very weirdly and heavily. Its back was so arched that its spinal bones were sticking out, and its arms were lanky and bony with claws at the end that looked like branches. She just didn't understand why she kept seeing the Wendigo when there was no connection there. After some research, she found out that sightings in your dreams could mean that the creature was possessing you. Now she admitted she did become more violent over the course of a few years, but that was due to mental health, not because she was possessed by a cannibalistic spirit. Now number 2 are the Nightmares Part 2. Now this one has nothing to do with the nightmares mentioned in number 3, but it is about another nightmare, so I just decided to title them Part 1 and 2.
Don't worry, we're not going to miss any Yeti things.
This one, however, was shared by Reddit user Dude, who said he had a horrifying dream about a Wendigo. In it, he went back in time to see how his city looked back in the day, and it was honestly just a few houses and a massive field. I swear if I had the option to go back in time, I wouldn't be like, oh, I wonder what Dubai looked like way back when. There's historical pictures for a reason, buddy. Either way, someone warned him not to go into the woods for fear of the Wendigo, but he ignored the warning. The woods were covered in a heavy fog, which made it hard to navigate through, and the user started feeling anxious. He was about to turn back when he saw a gigantic figure right in front of him. It had antlers and was as tall as a 2-apartment house, which is no bloody joke. One minute it was there and the next it was gone. Then he started seeing figures appear all around him, but he knew that Wendigos could make him hallucinate. Now he woke up sweating and fearful, but he couldn't stop seeing visions of distorted images in his head of people eating a lion or a zebra. He started losing control of his own sight, kind of like he was getting possessed by the Wendigo. And that's all he wrote, so I don't even know if he got fully possessed. And finally, at number 1 is The Canyon, shared by Reddit user Srosty. This story took place on March 27th of last year. Now, the user was riding his bike in his neighborhood, and there's this huge canyon that's about 400 feet from his house, so obviously he made his way there. On his way up the hill, he got a whiff of something absolutely disgusting. Despite nearly vomiting, he finally made it to the top of the hill. When he turned around, he literally started crying straight away. In front of him was a 12 to 15 foot tall Wendigo that had a wolf's head and was missing skin around its spinal cord. The boy could see through its ribcage and its legs were literally bent backwards like something out of The Exorcist. Now the Wendigo turned to face him, and it was at that moment the boy took off, narrowly
was that moment he realized he fucked up.
He claims he still cries every time he thinks about the encounter and hasn't gone biking since. Honestly, I'd be pretty scarred as well, so I wouldn't be trying to go there either, to be honest. And that is it for today's video, guys. Wendigos, I didn't know they were that big of a deal, but apparently they are, and apparently you can see them anywhere. Hopefully you can't see them in urban areas like Toronto. Let's just
Oh, of course you're Canadian.
Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. As always,
move on. So this is the Chenoo. It's like a Wendigo, but not. Here we go.
And today we're going.
Actually, let's go back.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Myths.
This is Legendary.
I'm your host, Legendary.
Get it?
And today we're going to talk about the Chenoo, a horror adventure tale from the Mi'kmaq tribe of Lower Canada and Upper Maine. So, long ago, a Native American family moved deeper into the woods to hunt. There's the young brave Abe, whose name means bow, which is what I'm going to call him from now on. His wife Kitpu, which means eagle, which is what I'm going to call her.
Use US video editor. I don't know if you can see that.
Does not actually have a name, so...
No, you can't. Never mind. It's just the image.
One day, while the husband is out hunting and the baby's sound asleep, the wife goes to gather firewood. Then all of a sudden she hears a sound. A creaking, cracking noise. She turns around.
Creaking, cracking
and there is a freaking Chenoo right there.
Crinkle,
9
crinkle
feet
noises.
Tall, with eyes of blue that burned with cold fire. A mouth full of fangs. Pale blue, frostbitten skin. And
it's like a Wendigo,
lips and
but
shoulders
not.
torn apart, as if he had just gripped and gnawed on himself in madness and hunger. Waves of magic streamed off him like smoke. On his back was a large pack. Now, usually this is where the story ends in screams and blood and death, but our female lead is really smart. She goes, Kisku, a word that means old man or father in a respectful way.
Does it though?
How have you been? You look well. Let me get you something to eat. She grabs him by the hand and takes him towards the house. Now, the Chenoo is confused, like, usually when he shows up, there's crying, screams, praying, and the smell of urine as people void their bowels in fear. But she's treating him like, well, like a human being.
Oh, no.
I mean, you might as well see how this goes. He can always just change his mind and eat her later, right? So she takes him home, she gives him a bath, she feeds him a nice warm meal, gets him some actual clothes, and the Chenoo is just like, wow. Is this what respect and decency feels like? I kind of like this. All this confusion and happiness does one thing that everyone thought was impossible for a Chenoo. It makes him forget his hunger. Now, for those of you who don't know what Chenoo is, Chenoo are literally beings of ice and hunger and magic. So if you make one forget it's hungry, that is impossible. It's like making the sun rise in the west. So he's cooling down, he's chilling out, and she goes to get more firewood, and he decides, nah, let me do this. So without a word, he takes the axe from her, chops down like he chops down 12 pine trees in 3 minutes, and she goes, okay, listen, we want to be warm, oh great wise one, but we don't want to force the entire place. This is enough. So he stops, he looks at her, hands her the axe, and sits right back down. So Bo comes back, And he is like the coolest husband ever, because he sees this giant monster of ice and death and immediately pulls out his bow and tomahawk like he's about to fight this thing. But fortunately for Bo, Beetle's like, no, honey, chill. I'm doing a thing, and he's been really calm since I did it. We treat him like a real person instead of a monster, and he doesn't eat us. And Bo goes, I bet.
I bet.
The right to die trying to stop him if he tries to snap on us. He sits down, he goes, hey, hello, Kisagoo, how have you been? Are you okay? Would you like to hear some stories of my family? And the Chenoo is just enraptured as he listens to these tales of love and respect, and he just lives them there with him for a week, not saying anything the whole time. But then he finally talks in a voice as cold as ice, as deep as the grave. Make me a sweat lodge. The hotter the better. They do, and the Chenoo goes into it and just sits in it for 12 hours, which, should have killed him, but magic. That's just how magic works.
Magic.
And he comes out and goes, boil me some tallow, which is animal fat. So Bo boils him up some animal fat and hands it to the Chenoo, who drinks it and starts coughing. He pukes up an ice statue in the shape of a human and says, hey, toss that one into the fire. They do, but it's so cold it puts out the fire, so they have to smash this ice statue into pieces and then feed it into the fire one by one after making the fire even hotter.
Okay.
When it's finally destroyed, he shrinks about a foot, his fangs recede, and his skin takes on a more human tone. He drinks some more tallow, pukes up another. They do it again. He's now looking remarkably more human. And, his fangs actually fit into his mouth now. His skin is more brown than blue. His eyes are a more human tone. Even his wounds are starting to heal. So, they destroy the second piece, of course, and then he picks up a third one, but he re-swallows it before they can destroy it and goes, no, I need that one. I need that one real quick for what's to come later. So they live together for a while longer, and when they run out of food, the Chenoo takes Bo and goes, hey, want to have to never worry about food again? And Bo goes, literally every day of my life. And they go to the river, and the Chenoo uses his magic to summon 2 giant dragons. And they kill the dragons, and the Chenoo tosses their skins, heads, feet, and tails back into the river.
Okay.
And goes, look, if we do it like this, they'll go back to being a bunch of normal lizards, and we can just always hunt them later. But for right now, all this meat, this is for y'all.
It's for y'all.
So Chenoo lifts the meat up, and he runs, and he easily outpaces Bo, who is the strongest and fastest guy in several tribes. Because, Chenoo, still magic.
Well, yeah.
Still strong. Still got a third of his magic power left. Winter breaks, and spring finally comes, and Chenoo goes, look, guys, it's been real, but I got one last thing to do. I have to fight Chenoo, this ancient Chenoo queen who's coming for me. You two should probably run. So the baby cries and Evil freaks out. Bo's like, look, my mama ain't raised no sucker. Let me get my wife and kid out of here. Then I'm going to help you kill this thing. Ain't nothing going to threaten my friends.
My friends.
So the good Chenoo goes, all right, cool.
So he
reveals what's in the bag he brought with him. 2 horns from a different dragon than the one he and Bo killed. He gives one to Bo and keeps the other and goes, okay, listen, these are magic. Even a full-grown Chenoo would be killed by this. Well, hey, aren't you still a Chenoo? At this point, I'm like a third Chenoo and 2/3 human. Listen, I trust you, I love you, I respect you, but only come if you think I'm dead or dying. I don't want you to catch a stray shot while we're shooting magic at each other. So the family runs away, and once they're like 4 or 5 valleys over, Bo goes back and he sees the Chenoo trying to carve his boy's heart out. So Bo's like, hold up. No one does my boy
like dirty.
That. Runs up on her and stabs her in the brain with the horn. She dies, of course, because, again, the horns are magic. And the 2 of them proceed to spend the next hour or so cutting her into pieces and burning the pieces to ash, because they do not want her regenerating.
They do not want
that. So
that.
after they burn every piece of her to ash, and then all 3 of her ice hearts,
3 ice hearts,
just to make sure she's deader than dead, the good Chenoo turns to Bo and goes, okay, one last favor. Destroy my last ice heart. What? Why? Look, I'm helping you now, but I'm a Chenoo. Sooner or later, my evil powers will restore themselves, and I love y'all too much to endanger you. So Bo, with tears in his eyes, does what he asks, shattering the last ice heart and melting it in the fire, killing Chenoo off once and for all. Then they go home. Then he goes home with his wife and child, and they live long and share this story with the village, letting everyone know that with kindness and decency, even the greatest monster can change.
It's a moral lesson.
That's my story. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And
you're welcome. I shared it quite well. Let's move on. The Legends of the Yeti. This is from a channel called Draw the Life Tic Tac Horror Stories. Let's watch this.
There are many stories around the world of ape-like creatures living in the farthest mountains and forests from civilization. This time, we present the Yeti, Jago for the Tibetans, or Abominable Snowman, as it is best known across the globe, is part of popular mythology in the Tibet and Nepal region. This is one of the most long-lasting myths about a mysterious monkey-like creature that is said to inhabit the highest mountains in Asia, especially the Himalayas. And it occupies a prominent place in local traditions and stories, since for centuries, countless people have claimed to have seen it, gathering bones, photographed footsteps, and even recollected fecal matter of this being.
The fecal matter? Not the fecal matter. That he is pondering orbs.
The first records about this creature date back to pre-Buddhist writings, where the description of a creature with simian features and long white fur. But it was in the 19th century that the legend of the Yeti, named as the Abominable Snowman by an Indian journalist, spread like wildfire among anyone who went up or down the Tibetan mountain range. According to some writings by the first explorers of Nepal in the decade of the 1830s, there were tales of hikers who claimed to have seen, along with their guide, a tall biped creature covered in long hair. These tales that didn't stop going from mouth to mouth among adventurers became, several years later, in a monstrous being that appeared to be real. Over the years, the human interest for this enigmatic Yeti only increased. It didn't matter if there weren't more proof than the tales. The imaginary created around this beast was too powerful, and so began a series of expeditions that had one goal: finding proof of the existence of the legendary Yeti, who for some strange reason was also called the Golden Monkey by the people from Nepal and the Tibet.
The Golden Monkey? Why?
One of the many hikers who delved into the range, Lawrence Waddell, reported what seemed to be footprints on the snow left by this strange creature, that were also confirmed by a photographer by the Royal Geographical Society, who alleged to have seen a creature that looked like the Yeti during one of his climbs in the mid-1920s. In order to provide genuine evidence, he photographed these footprints, which perfectly fit the description of this huge, white-haired animal that roamed the Himalayas. Such was the expectation these images created that during the 50s, a 6-month expedition was organized to look for scientific evidence on the existence of this famous snowman.
And they found poop.
The expedition was unsuccessful, yet it didn't undermine the legend going around, which to this day still haunts the minds of those who go to the Nepali mountains.
Nepali.
In 2008, a Japanese research group led by the scientist Yoshiteru Takashi, head of the Nippon Yeti Project, explored the high mountain region of Dhaulagiri 4, getting visual evidence of 18 inches long footprints that allegedly belonged to the elusive primate. Takashi states he will go back to Nepal and the Tibet in the future and won't abandon the project until the group obtains strong evidence of the existence of one of the most legendary beings on the planet.
Well, good luck.
The people who believe it exists consider it a distant relative of the orangutan that used to live in this mountain range millions of years ago, and that, from its features, it might be related to the American Bigfoot, the Australian Yowie, or the Conch from the Andes. However, there isn't any evidence of the existence of this primate. There is research that even relate the Yeti to bears, pointing out that it might be a grizzly bear from the Himalayas, and not a primate, as is often believed. Based on the facts that these mammals can stand and walk on 2 legs, and that due to their large size, they could easily be confused with this abominable snowman.
Okay.
To this day, there is no evidence that prove the existence of this peculiar being, but this doesn't mean it's impossible for it to be real. The countless stories of people who claim to have encountered it must be taken into account. They state to have heard a high-pitched whistle, far from what the roar of a bear sounds like. It flees the place where it is spotted with very agile and quick movements done in a standing position, just like a human being. They also claim it has very long arms that reach its knees and a disproportionately large head that ends on a peak. These features suggest that this creature is completely different from a bear, and that it could be a hominid, a missing link that evolved, reached a large size, and adapted to the cold weather of the Himalayas.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
It is worth noting that in all the sightings, only an individual is mentioned. Those who have seen it claim that it goes around on its own, forming a very significant objection to the fact that all species require a population of a certain size in all ages, since it would be difficult to conceal a population of these large creatures for such a long time. The fact is that, to this day, there are still expeditions that aim to find scientific evidence of the presence of the Yeti in this world. Despite we all love this kind of mythological mysteries, science can only refer to them as legends due to the lack of proof on this type of animals and uncategorized beasts. Naturally, this doesn't prevent the sightings, not only of the Yeti, but of any other creatures with similar features and other kinds of cryptids from all over the world. For now, believing or not in these creatures is entirely up to us.
Yes. Alright, next. Give me a second. Here's some Yeti footage, totally real.
Le film que vous voyez présentement est extrait d'un
enregistrement
de 45 minutes.
Never mind. Ooh. No.
Abominable snowman, also known as the Yeti, a strange humanoid creature that is thought to live in the Himalayan mountains in Asia. Eyewitness accounts say that it is around 6 feet tall, weighs between 200 and 400 pounds, and is covered in grayish black or reddish brown hair. Be sure to stay to the end of this video for another clue to what's going to be inside the Stranger Danger box that we are giving away at the end of this month. The Himalayan people have had legends of mythical creatures living in their mountains for thousands of years. The Mirka is a wild man that local legends say that anyone who sees one will soon die or be killed. The Boon Mankey, also known as the Meti, or more commonly as Yeti, is a man-beast, sometimes translated as jungle man. Often a Yeti is a warning sign or a figure of danger in local legends, a reason to stay close together and safe within the community by avoiding the dangers of traveling alone and wild animals. When Alexander the Great conquered the Indus Valley in 326 BC, he demanded to see one of these mythical beasts. However, locals told him they were unable to bring one because Yetis cannot survive in low altitude areas. These local legends were mostly forgotten by the outside world until modern times when Westerners began traveling to the Himalayas. In 1921, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Bury led an expedition up Mount Everest. Afterwards, he told journalist Henry Newman of an unexplained experience his team encountered while scaling the mountain's north face. He said his men noticed unknown dark shapes moving around in the snow above them. When they reached the area where they saw the shapes, all they could find were large human-like footprints in the snow. Newman published this story, and soon adventurers from around the world wanted to climb the Himalayas to try to catch their own glimpse of the mysterious, abominable snowman. In the 1950s, Yeti fever exploded when Eric Shipton, a highly respected Mount Everest climber, discovered and took photos of unusual footprints when he was searching for an alternative route up the mountain. These footprints looked human-like, but were massive and had a thumb. The Daily Mail published these photos in 1954, along with an alleged photo of a Yeti scalp, which got the attention of Edmund Hillary, the first recorded person to summit Mount Everest. Hillary launched his own investigation into the creature with the focus of discovering how they live at such a high altitude. Tom Slick, an American oil tycoon, spent 6 months with over 500 porters and bloodhounds in an attempt to be the first to find hard evidence of the existence of the creature. However, no one could find definitive proof of the existence of the elusive creature. In 1983, Robert Fleming Jr. led an expedition into the Barun Valley in Nepal, India, an area believed to be the ideal climate for Yetis, and the site of the most footprint discoveries. The expedition did encounter Yeti-like footprints as the others before them, but their local Sherpa guides suggested that those prints were actually from an undiscovered species of tree bears that lived in the area. Unusual skulls discovered and brought back from the expedition were later confirmed to be from a single species of Asiatic black bears. The Himalayan people also have legends of bears, such as the Mishi, or man bear, and the Dute, or cattle bear, that supposedly live high in the mountains. Most evidence of the Yeti come from sightings and differing reports and blurry photos of shapes and footprints. Edmund Hillary died a Yeti skeptic, but he did discover his own set of mysterious footprints and brought back a supposed Yeti scalp from a monastery high in the Himalayas. The scalp was later determined to be made from the hide of a sero, a goat-like animal that lives in the Himalayan mountains. Tom Slick's massive expedition did collect an unknown feces sample thought to be from a Yeti. The sample was discovered to contain a parasite which could not be classified. Cryptozoologists have used this as an argument that animals have their own unique parasites, indicating this unknown parasite may have originated from an unknown animal, such as a Yeti. In 2017, researchers analyzed 9 different Yeti specimens, including tooth, hair, bone, skin, and fecal samples, collected from sites around the Tibetan Plateau and Himalayas, from caves, monasteries, and other sites. 8 of the samples were either from Tibetan black bears, Asian black bears, or Himalayan brown bears, and the 9th was from a dog. What are your thoughts, strangers? Do you think Yetis exist? Do you think people are mistaking rare bear sightings? Be sure to let us know your theories in the comments below, which of course will enter you for a chance to win the Stranger Danger box that we keep hyping up that we're going to give to one of you lucky strangers. Finally, the next clue. This item has been used for divination since...
Okay, we're moving on. Here we go. Himalayan Yeti cutter caught on tape. Butcher Kid videos. I bet this is 100% real.
I believe I am about to freeze to death from hypothermia.
Good.
And internal bleeding after being attacked by an abominable snowman.
I'm sure this is real.
I have managed to escape my life, but there is no way I can make it to base camp before my frostbitten balls fall off. I cannot outrun this creature anymore with Jack Frost nibbling on my nuts. Wait a second. Did you hear that? I just heard something. Oh. It sounded like... Is it? Holy shit! It's another albino Bigfoot! It is a good thing that there is some distance between us, because that will give me enough time to kiss my ass goodbye before I die.
It's coming. There's another.
What the hell? Holy shitteroni! He has a sled! There is no way I will escape. He is definitely going to get me. I am a dead man for sure. He's losing control. He's going over the cliff. Holy Buddha.
Holy Buddha, he went over the cliff.
He went over the cliff. Oh my Buddha. I cannot believe it. Look. Holy Hoya. He fell down the mountain big time and go boom.
And go boom.
That had to hurt his hiney. I hope he hit his head and is dead so I can steal that sled. He's not moving. I think he must have been killed in a crash and died to death. Wait!
Oh
no!
He's still alive.
It is awake! The thing survived! It's alive! Hey, you asshole! Stop moving! You are going to cause an avalanche! Yeah, screw you too, bud! Get the heck out of here, you beast! Take a hike!
I'm going. There you go,
Yetis!
Chat. Them damn Yetis, chat. A Butcher Kid film. Thank you, Butcher Kid. Butcher Kid videos. Beautiful. Totally real. Alright, next.
I've heard of the...
Oh, this is long. We're not watching this. Sorry. Strange, scary Yeti stories. I'll post this for you. This is from What Lurks Beneath. We're not watching this full thing. It's too long. And I didn't realize how much of the time would be spent doing what I'm doing. So I'm going to send that in the Spook House if you want to listen to that and watch that on your own. So let's put that there in the Spook House. Okay, there we go. We won't watch that one. Too long. Don't have the time or patience. Bigfoot Encounter on Christmas 2014 in northern Minnesota. Let's watch this in this shitty ass format.
Say Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
The tree.
Let's see the Bigfoot. He's coming.
What was that?
Oh my god.
What is that? Is that Bigfoot?
You see that?
Something's behind the garage.
Is it Bigfoot?
Did you see that?
No, what was it?
It was really big. Oh my god, do you see it?
Yeah.
Oh my god. No way.
That can't be.
What the hell? Oh my god, are you getting this?
Are you getting it? It's real, okay? Don't doubt, it's real.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. The shittiest ass format possible to get it. Oh no, doggo.
Oh no.
We should probably get your dog so the Yeti doesn't eat it. But I mean, it's probably just your friend in a suit, so. Bark, bark.
We're scared of him. Rap.
Bark, bark.
Stay here, Rap. You stay here.
I mean, it's too late. The dog's already gone.
Let me get closer.
Where the heck did it go?
I don't know. I hear something though. I still hear it.
I still hear it alright.
You guys hear it?
There's something moving.
Yeah, it is.
Bork, bork.
Riff! Come on, Riff!
Yeah, good job not getting the dog. Just get the fucking dog. Don't act dumb, just pick the dog up. What the hell is that? It's totally not our friend just out in the woods in a suit. Real. Get the fucking dog. If something happens to it, it's your fault.
I did too.
Rip! Stay here. Rip!
It's gonna come out in the clearing.
Oh, there it is, right over there.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Not real. Yeah, he broke in it.
God.
He broke in it like
We
a
better get
fucking.
back inside, guys.
Yeah, no shit. Alright. There was that. Let me get to something else now. Let us move to this creature. The Nuckelavee, demon horse of Scottish Isles. Scottish mythology. Let's take a listen from Mythology and Fiction Explain. Whoosh. There it is.
For today's story, we travel to the Orkney Islands, located in the Northern Isles of Scotland, where a horrid creature roams the land and terrorizes its people. The Devil o' the Sea, the Nuckelavee.
Nuckelavee, okay, that's how you say
Now,
it.
to say that the Nuckelavee is a Scottish legend because it originates from the Scottish Isles isn't exactly the whole story.
Okay.
Over the years, the Orkney Islands were inhabited by many different groups of people, including the Celts, the Romans, the Scandinavians, and of course the Scottish.
Yeah,
Which is why it is often categorized as its own set of mythology. Orcadian mythology, which is a combination of quite a few different cultures. The Nuckelavee is almost always described as a creature that is pure evil, that took pleasure in terrorizing the people of the Northern Islands.
Look at it, does it look like it doesn't?
Crops, sickening their livestock, and driving many
Doesn't it
from
look
their
pure
home.
fucking evil, my
The
guy?
people of the Isles saw the Nuckelavee as nothing short of a devil, and many believe that the name Nuck originated from Nick, with Old Nick being a Christian nickname for the devil. Those natives of the Northern Isles would avoid saying its name at all cost, and when they did, it would be followed by a prayer. So what does something as evil as a Nuckelavee even look like? Well, it's pretty hard to say for sure, because most of what we know about its appearance comes from people who have claimed to have seen it, and these accounts are inconsistent to say the least. Most descriptions, however, describe it as a combination between a horse and a human, and I guess the most accurate description we have is somewhere in between, as sometimes it looks like a man riding a horse, and other times it appears as some kind of mutation between the two. It's particularly gruesome looking because it appears with no skin or hair, almost as if it's been turned inside out, with exposed sinews and muscles.
Well, we can see that.
Its thick black blood could be seen coursing through its veins, and from its mouth came a foul-smelling smoke. It was this breath that could wilt crops and sicken cattle. Its appearance has been likened to a man who stands 9 feet tall, but who weighs 2,000 pounds, and whose head is 10 times the size of any human. It was predominantly seen as a creature of the sea, who ventures onto land only to cause chaos. Though despite the fact that it is a sea creature, it has a strong aversion to fresh water, and this fueled the belief that one of the only ways one could escape the Nuckelavee was to run across a stream of water, as it wouldn't follow. It would also never venture past the beach and come ashore if it was raining, so I guess another reason to be grateful for rainy days. The only other way to avoid the Nuckelavee was by burning seaweed, as the smell would send it into a fit of rage, turning its attention to cattle, killing entire fields of cropping cattle to spite those who dare to burn seaweed. It was even known to infect other horses with a deadly disease. One of the most descriptive accounts we have comes from an islander named Tomas, who described a demon horse as a man's torso attached to a horse's back, as if it were a rider. The male torso has no legs, but it has arms that can reach the ground from its position atop the horse. It has 2 heads, the head of a horse and the head of a human, which was known to roll back and forth and could be seen as big as 3 feet in diameter. The horse's head had 1 giant eye that burns like a red flame, and from its mouth is where the toxic vapor emits from. There are other accounts that state the creature resembles a centaur, but they're so inconsistent it's hard to say for sure because the small details are always changing. There are no known descriptions or tales of what form the Nuckelavee takes when it's in the sea, but when it does eventually venture onto land, a horse-like demon is the best description we have, and that is one that might sound quite familiar to some of you, and that's because there are many similar creatures in other folklore, such as the Norwegian Noken, or the Scottish Kelpie, which were also malevolent water spirits that could have easily influenced tales of the Nuckelavee. Whenever there was a drought or a poor harvest, that would be blamed on the Nuckelavee.
Salmon skin.
And overall it was seen as the most malevolent entity in the entirety of the Northern Isles, because it was just pure evil, with no redeeming features or characteristics.
Why would it have
I do find tales of the Nuckelavee quite interesting, because it's this weird hybrid mix in physical appearance, but it's also a mix of Celtic, Scandinavian and Scottish mythology, which could definitely explain why. It's also entirely possible that the people of the Northern Isles needed a way to explain the negative aspects of nature. I guess one of the easiest ways of doing this, while still being able to bring people together and controlling the way they behave, was to create this demonic figure that they could all band together against. Feel free to share your thoughts on the Nuckelavee with me in the comments below, and if anyone does happen to live in the Northern Isles, I'd love to hear how the legend is interpreted today. As always, I've been your host, Mythology and Fiction Explained.
Alrighty. There was that for the Nuckelavee. We'll pass for this. The Skinless Horse Demon. Lilith Wolf or Liath Wolf, I don't fucking know.
Far in the north of Scotland.
That's a dude.
On the island of Orkney, there is said to live a terrifying beast.
A terrifying
demon.
Beast.
A creature ripped purely from nightmares and given freedom to roam on both land and sea.
It hates you.
The devil of the sea, known to most Arcadians as the Nuckelavee. The Nuckelavee, unlike many creatures in folklore, was a being of pure hatred and evil. Its only purpose was to bring terrible misfortune to the islanders. The home of the beast was thought to be in the North Sea, which surrounds the Orkney Islands. It is known to emerge from its underwater slumber and walk freely upon the land. As you can imagine, there are many conflicting descriptions of this creature, some from legend, some from supposed eyewitnesses. What is consistent throughout the descriptions is the monstrous and grotesque nature of the demon. It is said the Nuckelavee has the head and torso of a giant man, a great maw of a mouth incorporated into its elongated pig-like snout, with a single eye that burned with a bright red flame. From its upper torso hung long arms that could scrape the ground with talon-like fingers. The lower half of the creature's body was that of a great horse. But most disturbing of all was that the creature from head to hoof was skinless.
Head to hoof.
Only raw, sinew-like muscle could be seen writhing and snapping with its
inhuman
inhuman
raw,
movements.
sinew-like muscle.
Covering this beast was a web
of
black ichor-filled veins, pulsating with each pace the demon took. Truly a vision from humanity's darkest nightmares. It was thought by the islanders that the very breath of the Nuckelavee was a foul poison that would wilt crops, cause droughts, and was held responsible for many an epidemic. With this being said, the beast was not all-powerful. In fact, it was caged within its home beneath the waves during the summer months. According to tales told by the old Arcadians, there was one entity with enough power to keep the Nuckelavee restrained. The Great Mither of the Sea. But more on that another time perhaps. The Nuckelavee detested fresh water, such as streams and rivers. To such an extent, in fact, the demon would not walk upon the land during the rain. This was the only known way to escape from the beast. Stories tell of islanders who jumped into rivers or lochs to escape. One, in particular, was recorded by Walter Denizen, an Orkney folklore researcher. It was told to him by a farm worker named Thomas. Thomas recalls walking home late one evening, and he saw a great object rise beyond his vision. As the shape drew closer, a large, glaring red flame was seen. Thomas knew it could be the dreaded Nuckelavee. He remembered tales of the demon's fear for fresh water, and ran with all the speed he could muster to a nearby river. With the hooves of the devil hot on his trail, the farmer leapt the river and landed safe on the other side. But as the farmer would lead us to believe, not without his favourite hat. Looking back at the Nuckelavee, he saw the fearsome beast raging like the crashing waves on the other side of the bank, and in its hands the young farmer's bonnet. With the realisation of how close his death had been, Thomas fell unconscious.
Oh god.
Certainly is a wonderful tale, but not the last we would hear of the beast. On the islands, in time gone by, there was a practice of gathering and burning kelp. The ash produced was used in the making of soaps and glass. But the process of burning released a foul-smelling white smoke. These toxic fumes enraged the Nuckelavee, who could not withstand the oily smoke. His wrath for this incident was in the form of a new deadly plague, called the Mortashine, an infectious disease that targeted the Equidae family, such as horses, mules and donkeys. The animals would suffer lesions, an ulceration in the lungs leading to death. First, this happened to the horses on the island of Stronsay, but quickly it spread throughout all of the islands. This was the vengeance reaped on the islanders for disturbing the devil of the sea. The origin of the Nuckelavee It's thought to be found in Celtic and Scandinavian mythology. This would make sense, considering its place in the mythology and history of the Orkney Islands, whom for a time were called home not only to the Celtic tribes in the north, but also to the Vikings. The Norsemen had settled many of the islands,
and also the Romans,
and used them as a hub to launch pirate expeditions along the coast of mainland Scotland. The Nuckelavee seems to be an amalgam of the Celtic waterhorse or kelpie and some dark spectre from Norse legend. What we do know for certain is that the deadly pestilence of the Mortasheen was in fact an infectious bacterial disease we now know as glanders. It's caused by the contamination of food and water with the bacteria. The condition could be spread through contact with the animal or its body fluid.
Well then.
Glanders as a disease has been well documented throughout history, with one of the earliest descriptions coming from Hippocrates in 425
look at that.
BCE.
Hippocrates.
All
what
in
a
all,
hypocrite.
The skinless, horse-born demon, the Nuckelavee, is one of the most malevolent and evil creatures in all of Scottish folklore.
You don't say.
Thanks for listening.
You're welcome. Alright, thank you. I was making fun of your accent, but you did a good job. Good job. Leith Wolf. Alright, anyway, moving on. We're not watching this one. Too long. This one is kind of just... I don't think I'm going to watch that one either. So, last video. Let's watch this independent creepypasta film to round out tonight. The other one I think we get is...
I work in a government lab in a pretty unique field. My field is called de-extinction, or resurrection biology.
Oh boy.
Most of the stuff we do just involves selective breeding, and similar things that help boost the population of endangered species. And yeah, most of the time it just feels like I'm a glorified conservationist.
Well, I mean,
but there are some projects we do that are really mind-blowing. You may have heard a famous example of a similar group to mine who was working on woolly mammoth DNA. It's an ongoing project, but their goal is to resurrect the woolly mammoth species by cloning the deceased mammoth they found in the ice. Well, 3 months ago, one of our excavation teams uncovered something while digging in the Arctic. Scanning the ice with ground-penetrating radar, they detected something 30 meters down. When they dug it up, they had no idea what it was. It looked like a human and a horse had fused together. More precisely, it was the complete body of a horse, with a human torso coming out of the horse's back.
Oh no.
The human component had extremely long arms that looked like they would drag along the ground if the horse were to run. Also, the human component's skull had evidence of a mouth and nose, but it had no eye sockets. And the horse's skull, rather than having 2 eye sockets, had one large one in the middle. Another creepy finding is that it appeared to have no skin. Usually, when humans and animals were dug up in the ice, they would be in a state of mummification, and their skin would be preserved to an extent. But here, around the entire carcass, it seemed that the skin was gone.
You failed.
Never had been there. The top layer was simply muscle. At first, when they brought it back to the lab and we all took a closer look, we thought it was some sort of man-made mutilation, but we were shocked when we found in the horse's body the same DNA as in the fused human's body. They hadn't been fused. This was an intact organism. No one had ever heard of a species like this in the fossil or historical records.
What do you mean you haven't heard of the historical records?
Trying to resurrect it. Since we had no idea what species it was even close to, or what could possibly birth it, we began cloning about 20 replicates inside 20 artificial wombs with different birthing conditions. 5 of the clones died in gestation within the first week. 10 of them looked unwell. 4 of them looked pretty good, and 1 of them looked great. The clone that looked great, clone number 7, or C7 for short, was placed under round-the-clock surveillance to make sure the project succeeded. But while my group worked on the resurrection, another group was still performing the autopsy on the specimen found in the ice. After about 10 days, they released the report, and it was found that the central nervous system of the animal was inside the horse's head. The human's head was empty, and nerves from the horse's central nervous system controlled the entire body, including the long humanoid arms.
There were other things that made the horse's brain highly irregular, however. Not only was it more sophisticated than a human brain, it had several regions that were entirely unlike anything we had seen in any mammalian brain, structures whose purpose we had no way of identifying. The body was a similar story. There was a stomach, which although was unusual, was recognized as a stomach, and intestines and the rest of the digestive system. The creature had heart, a couple of them in fact, but it had no lungs, and it had many organs, both in the horse's body and in the human's body and head, that we had no way of identifying, and functionality well beyond our imagining. While perhaps this should have been concerning, at the time it just fueled our ambition and our drive to see how this thing behaved living. 3 weeks went by, and the embryo was starting to take shape. The human head folded up right next to the horse's in that tight little space, and the long arms wrapped around itself twice. We had no way of knowing when the gestation period was supposed to end, or when the creature had developed enough to survive outside the artificial environment. But I noticed that as the creature got larger and larger in the artificial womb, more and more of my subordinates took ill. It got to the point where everyone on the floor directly was no longer available, and I had to tend to the creature myself. 6 weeks into the growth, I was starting to feel sick too, but I wasn't sure why. I felt tired all the time, and weak, and one of the people in the autopsy group claimed to have an idea of what the creature might be. It didn't come from any scientific or credible sources, but we called a meeting, and he showed us images of what looked exactly like the creature. They were depictions, drawings from Orcadian and Celtic folklore. It was a creature called the Nuckelavee, fabled to exist in mythology. In mythology, it was thought of as not only a demon, but the nastiest one that existed. It was thought to bring droughts, wilt crops, sicken livestock and humans, even spread epidemics with its breath. We puzzled over how this was possible, and we all made our way to the balcony overlooking the artificial womb. We knew the creature didn't have lungs, and yet the horse's chest was moving. The creature was breathing. I felt afraid and petitioned the others to shut down the project. My boss was not too happy about that prospect, but with the support of the other divisions we managed to convince him. We all moved down to the platform where the creature was growing, and I pulled the plug. We listened in silence as its pulse slowed and then stopped. Then the Nuckelavee opened its eye. The claws at the end of its long arms tore through the plastic of its womb, and it was born again into the world as we ran screaming for the door. It ran after us, slipping and splashing in its embryonic fluid. We made it out of the lab and bolted the door shut behind us. We left someone standing just outside the door to make sure no one re-entered, and the rest of us made our way to the security room to watch it on the cameras. The creature was pacing around the room, and its human head was looking around wildly, seeming to notice that we were watching it on the cameras, despite that head not having any eyes. With its long arms, it tore down every camera it could find, except one it couldn't reach, high in the corner of the lab. We didn't know what disease it was able to transmit, or what had happened to our colleagues that fell ill. There was so much we didn't understand about its body and the mechanism of the way it spread sickness. We weren't even sure if sealing the room completely would help. We knew that it needed to die. First, we tried gaining access to the ventilation system and flooded the lab room with CO2. We had no idea how its breathing circuitry worked, but normally CO2 would suffocate an animal. But the Nuckelavee seemed entirely unbothered, appearing not even to notice. Being a government lab, we had access to a strike team, which was called in. 5 young men armed to the teeth ran into that room, and we locked the door behind them. On the security camera, we watched as they filled the Nuckelavee with lead. Despite not eating anything, in the week it took for the team to come out, the creature had grown much larger, and it ate every last one of those bullets as well as a grenade without taking any apparent damage. It galloped towards the team, dragging its freakishly long arms behind it and then whipping them up to tear through them. One member of the team escaped its clutches to regroup on the far side of the room, but was already coughing up blood through his mask. By the time he turned to face it again, he dropped dead seconds later, having never even been touched by the creature. For another couple days we lived at the office, brainstorming about how to end the creature, and eventually we figured that freezing it was the only thing that would work, as we had proof that it worked before. We sealed the room to the best of our ability and hooked up an industrial air conditioner to the ventilation. It took a lot of energy and time, but the room dropped to -20, -30, -40, and the creature was still moving. Despite not having any skin, it seemed to be insulated near perfectly. It really was a demon, or a god. -50,
god.
-60, 70, 80, and at last the Nuckelavee's movement slowed on the camera. It stopped moving, the horses one-eyed looking up at us. With an insulated suit, we entered the room to make sure it was dead, and we were immediately hit with an overwhelming feeling of doom. We could almost feel its two hearts beating, and a sickness spreading through our bodies. It wasn't dead.
Down with it.
It didn't seem to matter what we wore when we approached it. The sickness still got in, but for some reason it couldn't leave the room. So we called it a write-off, and to this day the Nuckelavee's sitting in that room, half frozen and half alive. Maybe it will die eventually. I can only pray. It's made me think twice about my whole career, about bringing back things that maybe are better left dead.
Well, you shouldn't have brought that thing back, that's for sure.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to that story. For more original creepy...
You're welcome, the Forgotten Grove. Thank you for that story. And with that, we come to the end of the Eerie Hours tonight. I'd like to thank everyone for sticking with me for this and being around to listen to some spooky winter monsters. With all that being said, I'm going to do a little showing like I usually do. Don't forget the movie caption contest, movie Pictionary, and movie Hangman are going on in Discord, so be sure to play those. And I will be back tomorrow for something. I don't know if it's going to be tits or what's going to go on. Maybe it's going to be a dark room. I don't know. We will see when that time comes. Anyway, with that all being said, have a good night, everyone. See you guys